Get peppy! Welcome to PEP 243 in 2026. That's Planet Extra Podcast. I'm Chad Dalloway, host of Planet America on ABC Australia, and this is an official podcast of the ABC. Say hi to the Ombudsman for me. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening, you can find us on YouTube at the PEP with Chaz and Dr. Dave channel, and you can find highlights there as well. And we're on Facebook at the Chaz from Planet America channel. We also find timestamps and show notes in our blurbs. And if you leave a comment under our current episode video, we're likely to see it. If you want to chat to some fellow peppers, you can join our Discord server. It's on the screen right now, or in the blurb of the podcast. If you want to contact me or Lockie the Lucky privately, why not email us? The address is producer@pepthepodcast.com. That address again is producer@pepthepodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe for all that peppy goodness. It all helps. We're going to be messing with a lot of what I just said soon. We often do mess with things at the start of the year. I'm going to be making some announcements right here when I do at the top of the pod, but I promise you the pod's going to stay as it is. We're recording this, by the way, at 10:18 p.m. on a Saturday night in Sydney, which is, what that was, that 6:18 a.m. on Saturday on the east coast of America. But for now, let's turn to one of our much-loved guest peppers who refuses to raise the stakes on inconsequential views, even more than I do, even more than Dr. Dave, who will be back next Friday. Do not fear. That is Jared Moonlight Mondschein. Hi, Jared.
Hello there. Thank you so much for the warm welcome.
Now, you're okay in the late nights, aren't you?
You're the only one I know who sleeps less than I do. So, yeah, late nights, whatever.
You're right. I do like the late nights, Jared, although I am off the bounce of being quite sick this week. That's why we didn't record 2 days ago. I am better than I was 2 days ago, but not 100%. So I may be looking a little bit ropey by the end of this pod. For those who are listening, if you watch the YouTube video around about the 3-hour mark, it might be entertaining viewing. And I do apologize once again to the listeners. You heard the beginnings of it. There will be coughs. Jared, why don't you tell us what you're grateful for?
I love starting with gratefuls. I am not grateful for social media. I don't know anyone who has cut social media out of their lives and regretted it.
Yeah, true.
Every single study I see says that the less social media you have in your life, the happier you are. With that said, there is one show on social media that is so wholesome, is so inspiring, so fun that I just love it. It is called Trackstar. I'm not sure if you've ever come across this,
Never.
but basically this guy in New York, Jack Coyne, he just interviews both musicians as well as just random people on the street. And it's like a quiz show. You listen to a song and they tell you if they know the artist or not.
I think I have seen this actually. It's in New York, yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he gets really famous people, like really famous people.
Yeah.
Like, David Byrne and stuff.
Yeah. I love it so much because it's not controversial. He's just a happy guy. He's born and raised in New York, but he's not like your gruff New Yorker. He's just like always smiling. And they're some of my favorite. Like you really see the nerd in some musicians come out, and I love it. So I think highlights for me would be Mark Ronson, Anderson .Paak, Thundercat. You'll see he plays the most random stuff you can imagine, and they're like on it. I love it. With that said, I do have to say it is at the same time a bit depressing that well-known musicians don't know classics like, Billie Eilish, and you know how she makes music with her brother, Phineas.
I do know that, yes.
Phineas was played U2, The Sweetest Thing, and he didn't know it was them. And I was like, how can you be producing music and not know U2?
It wasn't even an album track, Jared. Give him a break.
I don't know. The Sweetest Thing, iconic music video as well. I'm not like some U2 fanboy, but just...
I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I'm just trying to defend Phineas.
Nope.
And I'm sure the comments won't have
it.
My grateful. I want to express some gratitude for those who didn't make it through the American winter. Not physically, like in terms of their political lives.
Uh-huh.
They rendered services to US political stalkers such as myself, and I want to pay tribute to them. I'm grateful, even though some of them I don't like very much. I'm still grateful that they were part of the rich tapestry that we call American politics. Well, even some of them I'm not grateful there. But, roll with me. Lockie, hit the MIDI. Thank you. At least Stefanik, I don't know how you say your name. I never got that down.
Stefan.
Stefanik. She sold out harder than almost anyone has sold out over the last decade to try and make it. She's clearly a highly intelligent person, clearly capable, clearly charismatic as an individual. In an alternative universe, she'd probably be Speaker of the House right now. She also clearly has no principles or beliefs of her own and will say whatever she needs to advance her career prospects. She entered politics as a moderate, perfectly positioned to drag Republicans into the feminist era. That's how she was selling herself. And at first, she noticed which way the wind was blowing. She reinvented herself as a MAGA populist, cut all her old ties, disowned all her old friends who were going, so why are you blanking us? She's changed overnight. Was immediately successful, first in defending Trump during his impeachment, then prosecuting the culture war. She was number 4 Republican in the House almost overnight. Trump made her his UN ambassador, and then it all went pear-shaped.
He wanted to make her the UN ambassador.
Well, he nominated her, but then he screwed her over because he didn't want her to endanger her House seat. And he gave the position to Mike Waltz. Then Mike Johnson screwed her over and kept her out of House leadership. Then when she tried to run for New York governor instead, Trump screwed her over again by supporting her opponent, who was just some rando dude who had done nothing for Trump, even though at least Stefan had been sucking up to him for half a decade. And finally, she had enough punishment. She knew she would be lucky to scrape through the primary for the Republican governor, and then she would lose. It was 2026. She stands no chance in New York. And she was smart enough to see that she was about to have the stench of a loser all over her. She was pushing shit uphill, and she quit while she was this far behind, which was a smart move, to be honest. She's a smart person. The fact that she didn't need to lose to know she was done, that puts her about above 95% of politicians. Valet, Elise, you were a psychopath. But you're a smart one. I'm glad you're gone. Number 2, Tim Walz. Tim was going to run for another term as Minnesota governor, but he got so screwed by the developing welfare scandal in Minnesota, which we will mention later on, as well as a number of other local issues, by the way, with his management. He's not actually very popular in Minnesota. He decided to not even run again. I'm not sorry to see him go, I have to say. Walz had moments of real humanity, where he seemed like a really normal guy, which is actually rare amongst politicians. It's a talent in itself.
He came to Sydney and everyone said as much.
Yeah, like he does seem genuine,
Yeah.
which obviously is an act because he's a politician. But he also had many moments when he just made bad calls. Sometimes those bad calls weren't his fault. Like the way he loyally agreed to make himself a drone during the VP run. That was not his fault. That was the Harris campaign's fault. Other times, he just said stupid things and he made inexplicable decisions. A number of them were local issues in Minnesota that backfired on him. But the bottom line is, while he had some natural talent as a politician, I don't think he was very competent, either as a governor or as a politician in general. And I think Amy Klobuchar, his likely replacement, is nothing if not competent. So I think that's a big upgrade for the people of Minnesota, I have to say. Violate him. Lindsay Halligan and Alina Habba, you don't deserve your own entry. You're getting a double entry. You have not done enough to get a single entry each. Neither of you should have been anywhere near US attorney status. Both of you only got your jobs because you were such incredible flunkies. Both of you had your positions questioned by judges, and neither of you cared. I have a question mark if either of you even understood those judges. You were too arrogant, too ambitious, and too indifferent to the rule of law to give a shit, and courts spat you out over the holidays. Now, Habba has been given some shitty make-work job in the DOJ where Trump can pervert her. Lindsay Halligan has resigned altogether. And the only reason that Lindsay Halligan hasn't faced potential jail time for her scandalously incompetent period as US attorney was because a Trump appointee judge took pity on her. I'm going to quote District Judge David Novak. The court recognises that Ms. Halligan lacks the prosecutorial experience that has long been the norm for those nominated to the position of United States Attorney in this district. Consequently, in light of her inexperience, the court grants Ms. Halligan the benefit of the doubt and refrains from referring her for further investigation and disciplinary action regarding her misrepresentations to this court at this time. The judge, Lindsay, if you don't understand, is saying you're too stupid to be dishonest. Valet. Both of you can piss off. I hope we never see your likes again. You are both human manifestations of what is worst about the Trump administration, part 2. And finally, dear sweet Eagle Ed Martin Jr. Nice photo, Lucky. Ed, you're a shit stain from beginning to end. Am I going too far here? You only got your job, Ed, because you're a partisan hatchet man who was willing to do anything to destroy the other side. You have zero morals, zero competence, and zero humanity. You started off as U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., an incredibly important position, basically the person who makes prosecution decisions in Washington, D.C. But even Senate Republicans refuse to confirm you. Do you realize how low that bar is, Eagle Ed? So Trump put him in charge of pardons, basically dotting the I's and crossing the T's of all the corrupt decisions that Trump wanted to make. And he was also placed in charge of the weaponization working group, the people in charge of acting like they're ending weaponization, but actually ramping up weaponization of the DOJ as much as they could. Thankfully, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who undoubtedly will be on this package in a year's time, is torn between his loyalty to Trump and his loyalty to the law. Watching Todd Blanche morally struggle from day to day, it's genuinely popcorn viewing. And if Trump realised just how conflicted Blanche seems to be, he would never let him within a mile of power. But anyway, the half of Blanche that cares about the law apparently detests Eagle Ed Martin Jr., rightly so. So Blanche supposedly marginalised Martin within the administration to the point where he did nothing. He was just doing nothing. And now when Trump's looking for results in his weaponization drive, Martin's been jettisoned completely because he did nothing, both because he's incompetent and also because Blanche didn't let him do anything. The weaponization working group is now apparently meeting every day. And it's not even clear Martin has been invited to their meetings. He is on his way out. And while I'll be delighted to see the back of Eagle Ed Martin Jr., because he is the very worst, I'll be sad to retire this sting.
The Eagle's Nest.
Look at them all in heaven. Thank you for that graphic, Lockie. I can see you put a lot of time into it.
Ahead of the show, I asked you for if you want to do like predictions for the year or anything like that, and you just gave us one.
Todd Blanche. There's no way he's lasting the whole administration.
What about your favorite, Trisha?
Trisha? Oh no, I think she's going to be around for a long time because who else is going to hire her? So she's not going anywhere. Jared, do you have any thoughts about any of those people before we move on?
I loved nothing more than reading the profiles of Elise Stefanik. One, she used to be my representative when I was in upstate New York. Yeah. We forget that district used to basically be Kirsten Gillibrand's district, a Democrat, and Stefanik. And she could not have been more of a George W. Bush Republican. She literally worked in the George W. Bush administration and was Tim Ryan's person, right? Paul Ryan, not Tim Ryan, of Wisconsin, Paul Ryan, as in libertarian, very traditional conservative, not very Trumpian. And those profiles of Stefanik where her friends are like, we don't even know her anymore. Yeah. And what is she left with after all that? I wouldn't be surprised if she's back. These people who have these unlimited amounts of ambition, they have ways of finding their ways back into Trump's good graces. So you might have to talk about Elise sometime soon. We may well. I doubt it'll be through Trump though. I think Trump's going to have his own problems over the next few years, and they're not going to involve Elise Stefanik. but we'll see. Quick housekeeping before we get into actual content here. Play America is only going to be once a week. A lot of people are asking about that. Where's the Friday Play America? It will come back. It's going to come back as we approach the midterms. Until, I'm not sure if it's August or September. Whatever. As in, it will come back to 2? Yeah, we'll come back to 2. Okay. So we're going to have a Monday and a Friday eventually again. But the second year of the cycle, in the first half of the year, we tend to ease off a little bit. So for the first half of the year, it's definitely just the Monday show, and that's it. We'll be experimenting a bit with the pod, like I said, but
not in a way that gives you less information. Don't freak out. They will continue to be at least a 3-hour podcast coming every week, probably around dinner time on Fridays. I can't promise that every week, but probably around then. I'm already looking at what we need to cover right now, and I can see us getting up to date sometime after Easter. There's a lot to cover, so we'll probably have a bonus coming up soon. Also, the website, the YouTube account I'm referring to, will have Planet America content from now on, because people have been asking us forever to cut up Planet America into bits and pieces. And that's as good a place as any. We're not going to put in your feed. We're not going to spam you with Planet America in the PEP feed. So if you have notifications, which you should, if you don't, please put notifications on. You won't get any notifications for Planet America stuff, but it'll be there. If you look in our YouTube account on our main page, you'll find it there. So there. Let's get content, Jared. Now, let's start with ancient story from the holidays, which I'm sure everyone's interested in our take on. Now, Dave has already reserved Venezuela, so let's just leave that for a second. After Venezuela, Trump seemed to get a little bit cocky, and he wanted to go on with it. And the next cab off the rank was Greenland, and I believe this is ours to talk about now. So would you like to start?
Sure, I'd love to start. And firstly, I should say that this is a topic near and dear to my heart. One of my best friends is he was born in Denmark, but he was born to a Danish father and then an American mother. And that American mother is half Panamanian American, half Black American. And he was raised in Greenland, and now he lives in Canada. Wow. So if you're counting, that's Canada, Greenland, and Panama. So I feel like he really is just targeting my friend Stefan.
Yeah, this guy's quite invested in the first year of the Trump administration, I imagine.
Yeah. Yes. So the thing with Greenland, we forget that this is something that American presidents have wanted for some time. And if you look at the history of American expansion, Greenland sort of aligns with that in terms of it being a remote area with small population and an island, and it is not something that is some major urban metropolis type of dynamic. At the same time, we've wanted, we in the U.S. have wanted to buy Greenland a couple of times, and we asked the Danish a couple of times. They've said no. The Danish did give the Americans the West Indies, which is now known as the U.S. Virgin Islands, but they never did sell Greenland. And that was as recently as President Truman. Right. Now, I mention President Truman in particular because the U.S. during World War II or after World War II in the Cold War made Greenland a huge base of operations. Why is that? Because it is in the Arctic Circle, one of the largest territories, right? And it's very close to the United States and Russia. What else happened during the Cold War? The U.S. started NATO, and the U.S. also signed a number of agreements with Denmark and de facto Greenland as well, to be able to expand military operations in Greenland considerably, right? Now, let's not forget, what does NATO stand for more than anything else? An attack on one is an attack on all, right? Now, when is the one time NATO has ever been triggered?
Afghanistan.
9/11.
Yeah.
That's right. And it was not the European countries asking America to come to their rescue, but the complete opposite. Now, what is one country that lost more soldiers per capita than any other European country?
It's not Britain?
Denmark.
Really?
Lost more soldiers fighting alongside Americans in Afghanistan per capita than any other European country.
That's an interesting piece of trivia.
I'm
sure the Danish haven't forgotten that.
They have certainly not.
Yes.
And they had memorials of the over 40 Danish soldiers who died in Afghanistan outside the U.S. Embassy. And the U.S. Embassy personnel reportedly removed the memorial, and there's more controversy there. So you could, in many ways, and also I should mention that Denmark now, in addition to having, in the last few decades, supported the U.S. in both Afghanistan and Iraq, you could not have a more pro-American Scandinavian country in many ways. They are strong in immigration. You know, we know that Trump does not like the European so-called weakness on immigration or civilization erasure, I believe is what the national security strategy called it. Denmark has fought alongside the U.S. for decades. We have a visiting fellow right now at the U.S. Study Center, and which I forgot to do a caveat. I happen to work there, but I do not represent the U.S. Study Center whatsoever, especially after that in Memoriam section. But yeah, we have a visiting fellow who fought for as a Danish soldier in Afghanistan, but he was saying how he fought with the Americans, sometimes even wearing the U.S. flag, right? And to have America do this to Greenland in this way, to put so much pressure on Greenland. We can go into the TikTok of Trump, what Trump has done on this, but I just want to underline more than anything else, I have not met a single strategic thinker who thinks that what Trump has done on Greenland is necessary. It has undermined the U.S. in a way that has I can't think of a recent precedent for what Trump has done. I think it is more undermining to the U.S. than what the Trump administration has done in immigration, with the Muslim ban, with the criticism of NATO, with the extrajudicial killings in the Caribbean. This is the first time where there are actual discussions within Europe of defending themselves against a U.S. invasion, which blows NATO out of the water. It's one thing to say, I'm not going to defend Montenegro if they're attacked because they're a small country that I barely even know exists. It's nothing altogether to say, actually, we're just going to take it. Now, the worst part in all of this is that there's no need to do it. The U.S. administration has more access to Greenland than almost any other part of Europe because of what the agreements that have been signed in during the Cold War. These agreements allowed the U.S. to have a significant military presence. Now, the U.S. has drawn down that military presence. Why did they draw down that military presence? It was not because anyone forced them to. It was budget cuts. It was the end of the Cold War. They didn't see the need to do it. Sidebar, this is one of my most frustrating aspects of people trying to talk about budget cuts and how Bill Clinton actually saved money and was the first one to not run a deficit. Of course it's easy to run a deficit when the Cold War just ended.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you give, I'm not trying to say he doesn't deserve credit, but just look at the circumstances. So anyway, in Greenland, the U.S. has had significant military presence. It drew it down, and it could very well build it back up. And the Danes have said repeatedly, we're open to it. We're open to the U.S. military presence. We're open to critical minerals deals. And Trump has kept saying over and over and over again, well, we defend ownership. We don't defend things that are just leased. And it boggles the mind. There are a few times when there really is no excuse for what he's doing. There's some serious people that have tried to defend many of his controversial opinions, but on Greenland, there's just nothing there. Even the whole concept of why it's necessary, talking about how the Russians are more active and how China has in recent years started to define itself as a near Arctic country, which is sort of laughable. Because, Haiti is a near Arctic country by such definitions. It's still, there's no actual rationale for doing what he did. And all it has done, more than anything else, is undermine support for the United States amongst key allies and caused, this is, in my view, the most important, caused allies to hedge against America to a certain extent like they hadn't done before. Now, do I think they still, in the long term, will align with the United States? Yeah, because I still think that Xi Jinping is going to be Xi Jinping. With that said, what this does is cause these countries to, in my opinion, increase the likelihood of engaging in unnecessary behavior simply because the U.S. is so unreliable. Right? It's one thing for Trump to try the madman theory like Nixon, unpredictable, but the challenge is that cuts both ways, not just with adversaries, but also cuts with allies. And this undermines so much of what every single U.S. president has pursued for half a century or more.
I thought it was a really important moment when Slovakia's Prime Minister, Robert Fico, apparently in this period, he met Trump at Mar-a-Lago for a little powwow. For those who don't know, Slovakia is basically the number 2 supporter of America in Europe behind Hungary.
The Trump administration.
Yeah, the Trump administration, yes.
I don't think Hungary was a big fan of the Biden administration.
Slovakia isn't nearly as far gone as Hungary is, but Robert Fico was a massive booster of Donald Trump and sucking up to him. So that's why he met him at Mar-a-Lago. And now, this is during the Greenland period, when they were talking about Greenland. And then he met up with some European leaders on the sidelines during Davos. And he told them that Donald Trump was out of his mind and dangerous. This is his number 2 booster in Europe.
And look at all his champions his other champions in Europe. AfD in Germany, Nigel Farage in the UK. They all came out against this. If you have the AfD in Germany saying Trump is wrong on this, that's unprecedented to my knowledge. I don't follow European politics super closely, but this is really just next level. This is the same AfD where a number of their politicians have gotten in trouble for accepting money from Russia. Who gains from this more than anything else? In my view, Russia and China, because they can see the number 1 strategic advantage that the U.S. has over them is the allies and partners that work with the United States. All this does is put sand in the gears of that alliance and partner agenda.
Let's just go through, for those who missed a lot of these, let's just go through the bare bones of what happened.
Okay.
Because we're just talking broadly at the moment. First, so the Venezuela operation was, January 3, I think? January 4 was when Katie Miller was the first person I'm aware of who tweeted about this in its new iteration. That's Steve Miller's wife. She tweeted out this picture, this map of Greenland with an American flag on it with "soon" as her caption. It was like fresh off the Venezuela invasion.
Can we also just say, similar to Stefanik, the profiles of Katie Miller and people she went to high school with about what she was like as a person?
Interesting.
Very fascinating. Yeah. Talking about people not exactly big fans of her and speaking pretty terribly about her behavior. Again, maybe that's just journalist cherry picking, but it was pretty egregious.
Maybe they're Greenlanders. Just to put in context as well, when we talk about Katie Miller, like around the same time as this, she tweeted out a quote from an AI executive. Co-founder of Anthropic, my deep loyalty is to the principles of classical liberal democracy. If this is what they say publicly, this is how their AI model is programmed. Woke and deeply leftist ideology is what they want you to rely upon. She thinks the founding philosophy of America is woke and deeply leftist.
Because she doesn't even realize what a classical liberal is.
That's right.
It's uneducated, but it's also brazenly, terrible.
Anyway, so that was January 4. The next day, her husband, Stephen Miller, appears on TV and they ask him about what Katie Miller tweeted. And this is what he had to say.
Rule out that the U.S. is ever going to try to take Greenland by force?
Well, let me go back a step. The president has been clear for months now. So I know you're treating this as breaking news. The president has been clear for months now that the United States should be the nation that has Greenland as part of our overall security apparatus. The United States,
but your wife posted that like hours after the Venezuela operation. That's why it's newly relevant.
The United States should have Greenland as part of the United States. There's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you're asking of a military operation. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland. So
One last question,
Stephen. Doesn't make any sense.
One last question.
Look, to be fair, Steve Miller's probably right about that. No one is going to fight America militarily over the future of Greenland. But he didn't rule it out, did he? And that was very notable that he didn't rule it out. And then Miller said this as part of the same interview.
You can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else. But we live in a world, in the real world, Jake, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world that have existed since the beginning of time.
Now, he wasn't talking about Greenland there. He was talking about Venezuela. But people put 2 and 2 together. And at this point in time, journalists were starting to get quite interested. So they asked Caroline Levitt about this the day after, and she didn't rule it out either. She said Trump has made it well known that acquiring Greenland is a national security priority of the United States and is vital to deter our adversaries in the Arctic region. The president and his team are discussing a range of options to pursue this important foreign policy goal. And of course, utilising US military is always an option at the commander-in-chief's disposal. So that's a written statement right there. These refusals to rule out military action are obviously not an accident. They're very intentional and they were a threat. So then there was a working group established to make that happen, apparently.
The two sides agreed to really establish a working group of individuals who will continue to have technical talks on the acquisition of Greenland. Those talks will take place, I'm told, every 2 to 3 weeks. So this is a conversation the administration intends to keep having with the Danes and with the respected delegation from Greenland. But the president has made his priority quite clear. He wants the United States to acquire Greenland. He thinks it's in our best national security to do that.
For a week, we were basically in a holding pattern where there was just lots of vagaries and refusals to rule things out, keeping options open. Trump said over and over again that only America could defend Greenland, which I think there isn't a person on earth who doesn't agree with, that only America could defend Greenland from a superpower. He also said it was about setting up the Golden Dome properly, which, let me emphasize, because this doesn't get said a lot. The Golden Dome's never going to exist. Okay, it's very important everyone realizes that. Scientifically, garbage. It's never going to happen. Often they talk about it and no one ever says that. And so I think a lot of people will be starting to think about the Golden Dome as something that might actually happen. It's never going to happen, all right? At some point in time, I might take you through all the reasons why it's not going to happen, but I'm not going to waste your time now. Take it from me, okay? The Golden Dome is never going to happen. But Trump is pretending it will, and he's saying that Greenland's essential for it. So Europe has this bright idea at this point in time, after a week, to show that they're serious about defending Greenland, in the same way as they showed they were serious about NATO by bulking up their military spending. They put on a little demonstration for Trump. Denmark deploys additional Danish aircraft, naval assets, troops to Greenland. Not many, like 200. The UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Finland, Norway, and the Netherlands all send really not many troops. Germany, I think, sent 13 troops.
I thought the UK sent 1.
Which country?
The UK.
UK sent 1. There you go. For a Danish military training exercise. Estonia sent 0, but said they could. How lazy is that? It was meant to show that they were taking America's security concerns seriously. Right? Danish Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen said the purpose of the increased military presence in Greenland, to which the president refers, is to enhance security in the Arctic. We agree with the US. We need to do more. Since the Arctic is no longer a low-tension area, that's exactly why we and NATO partners are stepping up in full transparency with our American allies. Trump seemed to take that as some kind of threat, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he was worried by it. Maybe he was a really, really strong Brit. Maybe it was like that. So Trump announced 10% extra tariffs on all of those countries from February to be increased to 25% from July.
Which is where it became serious.
Yeah.
It was just a rhetorical thing for the longest time, but then he added, and it was, I think maybe 10 days, or it was Feb 1, I believe.
Yeah, it's Feb 1, yeah.
This was early January or mid-January when he announced this. And this is the first time where there's going to be a tangible result of his desire to own Greenland.
Exactly, because I don't think anyone's genuinely, despite Stephen Miller's desires and dreams, thinking they were going to send the destroyers into Greenland. But believing that Trump could impose a tariff, that's credible. So that's when it became real. And Trump truthed out, we have subsidised Denmark and all of the countries of the European Union and others for many years by not charging them tariffs or any other forms of remuneration. Now, after centuries, it's time for Denmark to give back. World peace is at stake. Come on. Okay, and then we get to the text. The famous text exchange. The PM of Norway first sent Trump a text. Now, these texts I'm about to show you are not the real text. They're just recreations by Daily Beast. Dear Mr. President, dear Donald, on the contact across the Atlantic, on Greenland, Gaza, Ukraine, and your tariff announcement yesterday, You know our position on these issues, but we believe we all should work to take this down and de-escalate. So much is happening around us where we need to stand together. We're proposing a call with you later today, with both of us. That this was also co-signed with the Finland's President, Alexander Stubb. We're proposing a call with you later today, with both of us, or separately. Give us a hint of what you prefer. Best, Alex and Jonas. So, as interested third parties, they're hoping to broker some kind of deal to take the heat out of the situation. And Trump replied, in total, Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it would always be predominant, but can now think about what's good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents, it's only the boat landed there hundreds of years ago, but we had boats landing there also. I've done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President DJT. Thoughts, Jared?
I would encourage you to, I'll have Lockie show this, a video of the Danish foreign minister smoking a cigarette after his meeting with the White House. Did you see this?
I have not seen this.
That gives you an indication of how well that first meeting went with the White House. Because, again, I can't imagine what Marco Rubio said behind closed doors, because he famously says one thing to like his former colleagues and then says something else to, let's say, colleagues in the Trump administration itself. Again, this is one of those instances where no serious person had any rationale for it. And similar to Trump's tension with India at the end of last year, which I think by all accounts was almost solely because Modi refused to nominate President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. I think this is once again solely a President Trump thing. There's no one else in the administration except for Stephen Miller. This, to me, it gets to the heart of so many aspects of this administration. And there's a tweet from I think the hashtag resistance favorite Republican senator Tom Tillis, where he talks about Stephen Miller, and you'll see where he talks about Stephen Miller being a character from Lord of the Rings, Wormtongue, who famously is like poisoning King Theoden. I don't understand why. Let's
read this out for the listeners.
Oh, sorry. You're right. Let's read it out.
Some parallels for movie buffs. Grimmer Wormtongue, the Stephen Miller of Lord of the Rings, is an advisor to King Theoden. He uses whispers and false flattery to control the king's decisions, all while secretly serving Saruman. He's a classic example of a sycophant who uses his position to poison a leader standing for his own benefit. Dolores Umbridge, the Christy Gnome of Harry Potter, is an example of a bureaucratic sycophant. She is terrifyingly sweet while she is around those she considers her superiors, and she sucks up to authority to gain the power she needs to bully those beneath her.
We can talk about Christy Gnome
another time.
Another time, but Stephen Miller, look at that. I don't understand why there aren't more Republicans going after him. Interestingly enough, he has been quite quiet over the last couple weeks because there, in my view, is no one who is more powerful in Trump's inner sanctum than him. Let's not forget Signalgate. It was when Stephen Miller chimed in that said the president made a call. We're going ahead. That everyone said thumbs up emoji, American flag emoji. It was done, right? There's no one, in my view, who carries more weight because let's not forget how far Stephen Miller has come with Trump, who has never once distanced him from Trump whatsoever. And he is but at the same time, some of the most egregious, unconstitutional behavior in the eyes of many that the Trump administration has engaged in. The Caribbean extrajudicial killings, the Muslim ban, the ICE in Minnesota, or even Venezuela, like all of these things, a lot of people would point to Stephen Miller more than anyone else.
Isn't that why Republicans haven't gone after him? Because he's so well loved by Trump?
But wouldn't this be the one opportunity to finally take him down? Isn't this the one time where everyone can say this has gone on too far. No one else in the administration championed this as much as Stephen Miller did.
We will get to this later on, but Minnesota was the moment, surely. Surely in that little period, in that week after Pretty got shot, they had Stephen Miller written all over it.
And he got the worst press I've ever seen in his time in the administration. Let's not forget the Muslim ban, right? And how, regardless of the constitutionality of it and the morality of it, the incompetence of it and how poorly executed it was, right? This is not passing value judgment on that. This is passing just basic competence of writing an executive order. And he supposedly is the one who did most of the work, and he left everyone confused and complete mayhem.
He's not a lawyer.
No.
Like he is running their legal department, and he is not a lawyer. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And also, I think, look, he's got a lot of flaws. But I think one of his critical flaws is he doesn't understand that he is different to other people.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't want to compare myself to Stephen Miller in any way, but when I was at uni, I remember my girlfriend at the time used to have a rule that you couldn't use me as an example in any argument because that's Chaz, that's not people. It was just I was too weird and too unusual to be used to make a comparison to any other human being. And I accepted that.
I'm shocked you guys didn't work out.
That's okay. This was cool. She wasn't wrong. The Chaz exception has continued to this day. And I get it. That's fine. I'm weird. Stephen Miller does not get it. Stephen Miller thinks that everyone, or at least the majority of the country, are just as hateful as he is. But they're not. No one is. No one is as hateful as he is. And apart from his complete lack of legal training and understanding, that's the mistake he keeps on making. He thinks the fact that it gives him a little warm tingle every time someone shoots someone else in a state, that is what happens to Americans. But that's not what happens to Americans. They get horrified. Like, they don't like crackdowns. They don't like military boots marching in time. Like, Stephen Miller does. And he doesn't get that he's the only one who thinks like that. And honestly, Trump would be in so much better position if he could just get rid of him. But I just don't think he ever will. And I think Republicans know that, which is why they don't bother.
I don't know. I think the combination of Greenland and Minnesota, I think that's the first time since the Muslim ban in 2017 that I've seen Stephen Miller actually get bad press for incompetence, not like cruelty, but just incompetence. And Trump hates incompetence more than he does cruelty.
I just want to just go back to that text because I feel like, you know, I did Trump the favor of reading out the entire text. I feel like I should just point out that there were a flaw or two in the text. Few things. Okay. Norway has nothing to do with Greenland. And the Norwegian PM has nothing to do with the Nobel Prize. So Trump trying to punish the Norwegian PM by being a sook about Greenland makes no sense. Stopping the 8 wars claim, just like with the Golden Dome, we need to keep on mentioning that stopping 8 wars claim, that's obviously bullshit. Don't accept it all because he repeats it over and over again. No, he has not stopped 8 wars. Plus, Trump saying he can now think about what's good and proper for the United States of America implies that until now he hasn't been thinking about what's good and proper for the United States of America. Yeah. He's just been thinking about what would win him a Nobel Peace Prize. It's a strange thing to admit.
Can I have one quick fact check?
Sure.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee, do you know who appoints that Nobel Committee?
No, I don't.
The Norwegian Parliament.
Oh, okay.
So he's not fully wrong that government is involved.
So he's got like a 5 steps of Kevin Bacon situation here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Fair enough.
I hate that I know that. It's only because like it really is so central to Trump's thinking.
No, it's good to point it out. That's why you're here, man. Thank you. It's also odd to suggest that the only reason he'd want to pursue peace is to win a prize. And if he doesn't win the prize, what's the point of peace? He's kind of outing himself as a moral degenerate when he writes that. Denmark doesn't need to be able to solely protect that land from Russia or China. As we said before, they are a part of NATO, which means America is actually in charge largely of protecting Greenland under NATO. That same logic of Trump's saying you have to own it to protect it could be applied to America taking over France. France can't protect itself from Russia or China either. It needs America. That's poor logic on Trump's behalf.
I will add, sorry to be that guy.
No, sure.
France has nuclear weapons. So.
I know it does, but good luck using them against Russia.
It's one of the few U.S. allies that is nuclear armed. So
I know.
It could have some defense, more so than Greenland.
Hey, give them a bite. Give them a bite, all right. But I reckon if Russia wanted to take over France, I reckon they're getting France.
Yeah.
If America doesn't get in there.
Yeah.
By the way, suggesting that the right to a land depends on power rather than on international law and the will of that country's people is the kind of argument that Russia uses when they're taking over Ukraine. That's bad guy arguments.
That is. So this is a bit of a bugbear of mine because so many people talk about the rules-based order or international law. What does that even mean? And famously, the Prime Minister of Canada talks about this, how the international rules-based order is sort of just something we talk about, but there isn't. It isn't foolproof, and there's lots of exceptions, and a lot of times the sort of remedy to crimes depends on both the perpetrator and the victim. Blah blah blah. Yes, but fundamentally, in my view, the way I think about international law and the whole concept of rules-based orders. Might should not equal right, right? Just because you're stronger than a country doesn't mean you can and or should take them over, right? And again, there are lots of exceptions of this in the U.S. behavior in particular, but that is the argument that the U.S. has against Russia invading Ukraine. That's the argument that the U.S. has against China taking up more of the South China Sea from the Philippines. There's that is just revisionist powers, right? Revising the borders. That is something that the U.S. has been against since the end of World War II. If the U.S. did believe in might equaling right in every instance, then Japan would be speaking English, as would Germany.
Yep. Also, the reason Greenland's part of Denmark, it's not because a boat landed there hundreds of years ago. It's because the people of Greenland have agreed to be part of Denmark. That is the way it works with Greenland and Denmark. I am going to get to that. Greenland as a territory is very different to Puerto Rico, say, as a territory. And we really should just back over that because, it's not necessarily in Greenland's interest to be part of America as a territory. Also, on NATO, Trump says, I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States. I reckon there'll be a lot of people who would hear that and go, you know what, he's been a dick, but he's right. He'd say, there'll definitely be people who will hear that and go, well, because Trump has been threatening NATO, they have armed up, and they are now spending twice as much on their military than they were before. So he has done a lot for NATO. If he was just bluffing the whole time, good bluff. It worked. There'll be people who'll be thinking that. I am going to argue against those people, and I'll tell you why. While it's wonderful that Trump pressured Europe to boost their defense spending, Vladimir Putin may have had much more effect than he did. The invasion of Ukraine, that really got them spending on defense, right? A lot more than Trump's threats did.
I think it also got them better at dealing with Trump in the first year of this administration than in the first administration.
Yeah.
Let's not forget what happened with the G7 meeting with Angela Merkel and everyone getting angry at Trump. And it's amazing how much clarity a war provides. Where in many ways you could say that European countries, in my opinion, handled Trump better in the first year than a lot of Asian countries.
Yeah.
Which was the reverse of what happened in the first term. Right? And what is that? In the first term, China was a threat.
Yeah.
In the second term, Russia wasn't just a threat. It actually, there's the first land war in Europe since World War II.
It's a great point. But my main argument against those people who say, you increase spending, is military spending is not the most important resource in NATO. It's just not. The most important resource in NATO is credibility. That's much more powerful than even America's nuclear arsenal. You can have the biggest US nuclear arsenal in the world, if Russia doesn't think you're going to use it, it's worthless. The power of NATO is Russia believing that there is a credible threat that if they invade any of those countries, they've got a real war on their hands. That's all that NATO's worth. You can have all the military in the world, it's worth nothing without that credibility. Now, what's Trump done? Trump has weakened NATO more than any other person in history because he's called that credibility into question over and over and over again, to the point where I don't think anyone on earth truly feels they know whether Trump would defend a NATO country if it was invaded. That is terrible for NATO. That's made it so much weaker than all the military spending in the world. So I disagree with him. I think he's been the worst president for NATO in its history. And NATO, as you pointed out, did do something for America after 9/11. So there is that. And not to mention the 27 military bases that America enjoys in NATO countries right now. Finally, the world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Well, that's stupid. Greenland's not the most important territory on Earth, and you don't need to completely control every region which is important to you. Once again, name a region. America doesn't need to control it. So I spent a bit of time on that text message because everyone's read it, and I just thought, let's not let it stand. Polling, in case you're interested, I'm shocked. Do you want to guess? That this is Pew polling, where America's adults are in terms of pro or con the US takeover of Greenland? What do you reckon?
80% against.
It's 58% against, 21% in favour of, 20% say they're not sure. And in a year, it's almost not changed at all. In March last year, it was 54% against instead of 58% against. I was surprised. I would have expected it to be up in the 70s and 80s as well. Yeah. Oh, well.
I think I've said this on PEP before, but I just want to highlight in terms of the views on NATO in the United States and how much is that Trump, how much is that unique to Trump, how much of that is not. And the Obama administration's Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, he gave a speech on the future of NATO in 2011. And he basically called them out for not doing enough. And he said, indeed, if current trends in the decline of European defense capabilities are not halted and reversed, future U.S. political leaders, those for whom the Cold War was not the formative experience that it was for me, may not consider the return on America's investment in NATO worth the cost. What? And he's listed out a bunch of different stuff before that quote. Then he said, what I've sketched out is the real possibility for a dim, if not dismal, future for the transatlantic alliance. Such a future is possible, but not inevitable. So, this is not unique to Trump to call out Europe for not doing more. If you look at just GDP numbers, raw GDP numbers of Russia versus Europe, which the Trump administration does all the time, and Russia and the Trump administration is always saying, look at those numbers. Why can't they field a military to defend against Russia? The other thing I'll say is...
To be fair, it's getting a lot closer. Poland is kicking America's ass on military spending.
Right. So
it's a percentage of GDP.
Yeah, exactly. And they're more of a model ally, I believe, according to the Trump administration. I think it's important to note as well what the Greenlandic people think of this and why they like the status quo with Denmark as well. Denmark basically has a $700 million surplus, U.S. dollar surplus that it injects into the Greenlandic government every year.
Yes.
I don't think that sounds very American.
Dude, like I said, I did foreshadow this. I've got a lot to say about the difference between Danish territories and American territories.
And there's definitely some tension, don't get me wrong, between the Denmark, the Danish government and the Greenlandic people. There's been all sorts of anti-colonial sentiment within Greenland, and there's a strong patriotic feeling in Greenland about it being independent. And there's actually an independent independent movement in Greenland.
They may well end up independent.
Yeah, but it's hard to say no to $700 million on an annual basis.
Let me just rattle through these, because that is one of them. First of all, because America's got 3.6 million people in territories, right? Puerto Rico, Guam, US Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Northern Mariana Islands. They all have different situations. They all have a few things in common, though. Number one, no representation. They lack voting representation in Congress. They can't vote for president. Their delegates can introduce legislation, but they can't vote on the legislation they introduce into Congress. The federal government claims and regularly exercises near unlimited powers to govern them. They have no say in that. Greenland has self-government. Greenland is broadly autonomous from Denmark. Greenland has 2 full members of the Danish parliament. Okay, that's the difference. Taxation. Residents of American territories pay $5 trillion in tax, mostly payroll tax. But they don't receive a whole bunch of US safety net programs like Medicaid, for instance. Greenland doesn't pay Danish tax at all, but has full access to the Danish safety net anyway, which, by the way, is bigger than the American safety net. Denmark provides, as you said, $700 million a year, over $10,000 per resident on top of that, even though Greenland doesn't pay tax. No self-determination. US territories have no right to actually determine whether they stay part of America or not. Puerto Rico is to-ing and fro-ing about whether they're going to have referendums or whatever. But some of the territories, no one's even asking them. Denmark expressly recognises Greenland's right to self-determination with a legal right to pursue independence any time they want. It's in writing. They can do that any time they want. Finally, exploitation. In May 2025, the Department of Interior announced that they were going to just open up American Samoa's waters to deep sea mining, and they didn't ask American Samoa. And you know how much money American Samoa is going to get out of deep sea mining? Zero. American Samoa objected. They did temerity to say they didn't like that. So then they doubled the proposed mining zone, and then they said they were going to do the same thing to Guam and Northern Mariana Islands as well. There's no suggestion any of them are going to get a cent from any of that. Greenland has full autonomy and control over all mineral resource extraction activities in Greenland, with all revenue from such activities going to Greenland, except for when they do deals, like with America. So America actually has a better situation when it comes to minerals in Greenland than Denmark does, even though it's not an American territory, which goes to what you were saying before. So anyway, my point is, I mean, you're right. There are tensions between Greenland and Denmark, and Greenland may well be an independent country, but they're on a much better wicket than the American territories are, I'll tell you that. Let me ask you a question. Why did Trump back down? Because he was going on with this for weeks. And then just all of a sudden in Davos, he just took a step back. At that meeting of Davos, he had a meeting with Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General. Came out of that saying he'd formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland. He cancelled the threatened tariffs. I mean, it was pretty vague if we have a look at this.
Well, we have a concept of a deal. I think it's going to be a very good deal for the United States, also for them. And we're going to work together on something having to do with the Arctic as a whole, but also Greenland. And it has to do with the security, great security, strong security, and other things.
That's quite vague. I know a lot of details there. He said they were going to be involved in the Golden Dome, and they're going to be involved in mineral rights. And so are we. It was leaked later on that the deal was based on Britain's arrangement with Cyprus, where UK military bases there are considered British territory. It'd see parts of Greenland designated American sovereign base areas. The US would be able to conduct military intelligence operations there, station missiles, and develop infrastructure without needing Danish permits. I'm not sure how different that is to right now. It also included granting some American mining rights. They already have some of them. A lot of people are saying it basically did nothing that didn't already exist in the 1951 Defence of Greenland Agreement between Greenland and America. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, I promise you, the deal is not what we had before. It is much more fulsome for the United States. I will say one more thing, though. Even when Trump stepped back in Davos, there still was an implicit threat. Have a listen to this.
So we want a piece of ice for world protection, and they won't give it. We've never asked for anything else, and we could have kept that piece of land, and we didn't. So they have a choice. You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember.
That's apparently Trump backing down. So yeah, you can determine for yourself how much of a back down that was. To the extent that he did back down, and assuming he doesn't come back for another bite, why?
I don't think he has. I don't think it's permanent. I think this was something that will stay with him. But the reason that he seemed to indicate was the markets.
Yep.
There were people on Wall Street saying, oh, Trump deliberately did this because he knew it would tank the markets. He went to buy the dip and betting markets, blah, 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 all these conspiracy theories. But I think similar to Liberation Day, it seemed like it was the markets, and the NATO Secretary General gave him an out. And I think it seemed like there was also clarity, perhaps, that this was not something that he necessarily needed from some advisors. That I think eventually it broke through that this was unnecessary and unhelpful.
Yeah, look, that's pretty much accords with what I think too. I mean, Europe tried to pressure him. They suspended their recently negotiated trade agreement. They prepared $109 billion in retaliatory tariffs. I talked about this on TV. They threatened a coordinated European sell-off of $3.6 trillion in US Treasury bonds. And that's just the beginning. They have this thing called the anti-coercion instrument, which was designed in 2023 to stop China, not America, to stop China pushing Europe around. Works just as well for America, though. It allows the EU Council to suspend government purchases of public securities from a country pushing them around, and it can't be vetoed by any single country like, say, Hungary. Now, European governments and private investors currently, together, own $10.4 trillion, or 15.3% of US stocks, $3.4 trillion, or 11% of US government securities, and $2.9 trillion, or 11.6% of US corporate bonds. And every day, America, with its huge debt, becomes more and more vulnerable to bond market movements. So if the EU government starts selling, private investors at least partly followed, it could have a huge impact on the US economy. Stock and bond markets are melt down, major American companies go insolvent, especially financial companies. They'd be the first to go, and then you have another GFC. Macron apparently threatened this directly just before Davos. And so then, as you say, Russia gave him the excuse he needed to back down. If that's right, that's important because it means that leverage isn't going away. That leverage is still there. So if Trump comes for part two, they can just do it again. Out comes Macron again. And it also demonstrates the one restraint on Trump, which seems to be pretty steady, is fear of financial market turmoil.
One, or some Danish pension funds have already decided that they're going to decrease their exposure to the U.S. So, and these are billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar pension funds that are, they've said they can't do a complete divestment, but they are looking to, like I said, hedge. And what does this do? Hedge. What do I mean by that? It's basically hedging their bets, right? They know they can't rely on China, but they increasingly are of the view that they can't rely too much on the U.S. as well. And I think on the whole, in the long term, they can rely on the U.S. more than they can China. But still, what this does, in my view, is it weakens the ability of the U.S. allies and partners to stand up against long-term revisionist powers like China and Russia. What do I, for example, if a Taiwan contingency were to occur today, I would not expect NATO forces to send ships to Taiwan or to the region, but I would expect or hope that European countries would get on board for a sanction regime on China. It would be economically very costly, but I think worth it in the long term for the long-term stability of the region, if not world, right? But the ease and the likelihood of such coordination is decreasing with this behavior.
Yeah, do you have anything else to say, or should we move on?
Let's move on. Sorry.
No, this is good.
Stats Nugget.
I got a bunch of these. Keep them short. Center for Strategic and International Studies study on Ukraine estimates there's been 1.8 million casualties so far. That's people killed, injured, and missing in the Russia-Ukraine war, including up to 325,000 Russian soldiers and 140,000 Ukrainian soldiers, which means if you do the maths, that's all civilians left over. 875,000 Russians and 460,000 Ukrainians. So make what you will of that. Also, according to the CSIS, Russia's army is advancing in Ukraine at the slowest pace seen in more than 100 years of warfare. Putin's forces have advanced between 50 and 70 metres per day, depending on which offensive you're talking about, since early 2024. That's over 2 years ago. Slower than many campaigns did during the First World War, with trenches. And trenches didn't move very fast, Jared. So the worst example is there's a Russian offensive on Chasiv Yar, which began in February 2024. That's the 15 metre per day offensive. Would you care to guess how fast a snail moves at?
I wish I could. 25
metres a day.
Nice.
So it moves a little bit more than half the top speed of a snail. He had an offensive in Chasiv Yar. So yeah, it's pretty slow moving. That's your stats nugget about Ukraine. Now, this is not one of the big topics, but Jared, I cannot get you on here and not talk about polling because you know more about it than I do. And so it would be foolish for me to talk polling with Dave when Jared is around. So let's talk a little bit about polling.
Let's do it.
There's been some pretty poor polling for Trump since I've been away during the holidays. There's no two ways around it. The 50 plus 1 aggregate, that's kind of the new 538, has a recent low of 39.2 to 57. Trump started beginning of last year at plus 5 net approval. Now he's at minus 18 net approval. Pew has been particularly stark. They've gone from minus 4, 47 to 51, to minus 24, 37 to 61. This now, you might say, well, that always happens, doesn't it? Find a presidency where they're not much less popular at the beginning of the second year than they are during the honeymoon period.
Including Barack Obama,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But you know what? I want to show you a graph. This is Trump 2 versus Trump 1 and Biden, both of whom you might recall were not exactly polling darlings. And you can see Trump with minus 18 is now well below Biden and Trump 1 at the same time, who are minus 13. So there you go. That's comparing to the two least popular politicians of all time before this administration. He's not doing well. Some amazing results as part of this as well. That Pew poll I talked about before. In January 2026, Jared, only 56% of Republicans say they support all or most of Trump's policies. Republicans, 56%, a bare majority of Republicans say they support all or most of Trump's policies. It was 67% in February last year. Now, by the way, and 27% of independents do. 27%. Now, to be fair, that doesn't actually mean anything because, as we've seen endlessly recently, you ask Democrats about Democrats, you'll get a terrible response as well. It doesn't matter whether Republicans agree with Trump. It matters how much they hate Democrats.
Yep.
If they're going to come out to vote, at least. They might not vote at all. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's an interesting stat nevertheless, because that's not what we associate with Republicans. Even non-college whites, they are Trump's absolute base. The high school educated or below white voters. According to Fox, take a guess. What's their job approval with Trump, you reckon?
43.
It's not quite that bad. 49-51. He's just below underwater with them. But still, if he's lost those guys, he hasn't got anyone.
Yeah.
Those guys are the base of the base, right? The main story, though, they're the ace of base, if you will. Given we've been talking about Scandinavia. The main story, though.
That was just so perfectly dad. Like dad joke followed by some hard coughing. It was perfect.
Right. Independence. That's the main story.
Yeah.
This graph is nothing short of incredible. If you're listening, I'll try and describe it to you. This is the net approval graph amongst independents in Trump's first term versus his second term. Now, in the first term, at this point in time, he was minus 14 net approval amongst independents, where he stayed for basically until COVID. That's where he was until COVID, and then he dropped in COVID, and then came back, by the way. Not so right now. He has just dropped like a rock from the beginning of this term. He's now minus 40. And by the way, still dropping rapidly. So that's going down even more. I think Minnesota might have hurt him bad amongst independents. He's dropped like 10 during the Minnesota period.
Yeah.
So, but we'll get to that. Well, actually, let's get to it now. Immigration. Immigration has definitely been a problem for him in the last little while. 50 plus 1, their aggregate on immigration approvals, gone from plus 8 to minus 10. On deportations, he's now minus 12. New York Times Siena on immigration approval is down at minus 18. YouGov, 37% of people agree with how ICE is conducting its duties. That was before Preddy's killing. 37% and 57% disagree. 18% in YouGov said the Preddy shooting was justified. 55% said it wasn't. Reuters Ipsos, 58% say ICE agents have gone too far. 12% say they've not gone far enough. 26% say they're just right. So 38% are supporting them. 58% saying they've gone too far. YouGov in late January, 55% said they have very little confidence in ICE, up from 45% in December. Interestingly, this does seem to be not about immigration, but just about ICE. This is entirely about Minnesota.
When you ask about the border versus ICE, you get very different numbers. He still is above water on some polls when you specifically ask about the border.
Yeah, no, but also, I mean, these questions really isolate it. In early January, 50% of adults, 50, said they approve of what Trump is trying to accomplish on immigration. 37% approved of how he's going about it. Same people. 50% approve what he's trying to do. 37% approve of how he's doing it. YouGov, this week, 51% said they support Trump's goals on immigration policy. 27% support the implementation. That's the stat right there.
Stephen Miller right there.
Yeah, it is. YouGov also, 50 to 35% of Americans say, so 50% yes, 35% no, say that most anti-ICE protesters in Minneapolis have been peaceful. 35% say ICE officers have been responding to the protesters have been peaceful. 47% say they haven't been. So it's just reversed. It's about ICE. NPR, PBS, Marist. 68% of independents say ICE's actions are making America's somewhat less or much less safe. 56% say ICE are making Americans much less safe. 77% of Republicans report the actions of ICE are making Americans much more safe or somewhat more safe. So there you go. So Republicans aren't on board. 60% disapprove of the job that ICE is doing. 33% approve. 66% of independents disapprove. And more on how they're doing it. Who are they deporting? According to YouGov, 87% support deporting immigrants who've committed violent crimes. Even now, 87% support that. 22% support deporting long-term residents with no criminal record. 21% support deporting the parents of US citizen children. 17% support deporting people who came as children.
There's a lot of numbers here, but I'll get to what I think is the conclusion here is that there actually is a bipartisan consensus on immigration in the U.S. if you look at these numbers. Yeah. And they've been pretty consistent for some time. If you've been in the U.S. for 20 years, if you were born in the U.S., if you served in the U.S. military, most Americans are happy for you to stay. Maybe you pay a penalty. There's plenty of these videos of Obama speaking about these sorts of amnesties. Let's not forget the dreamers, right? There's a bipartisan consensus for this. With that said, the closest we've gotten, the last time we passed immigration reform, the Reagan administration. Yeah. The closest we've gotten since then, the George W. Bush administration. No president has sought to expend considerable political capital on this topic, despite there being a bipartisan consensus. Biden had it He did have legislation. He did have bipartisan consensus on it, but then Trump ran against it. With that said, it was not a first, second, or even third order priority for the Biden administration. They came to immigration very late into their administration, which we've talked about before.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more set of numbers, and this is an incredible set of numbers. This is a 300,000 voter poll by Civics. Okay, that's a lot of voters.
Yeah.
It's a big sample size. In September 2024, Americans opposed abolishing ICE by 46 points. 20% supported abolishing ICE, 66% opposed. I'm amazed they even asked that question in September 2024 because it was such an unpopular position. By late 2025, a year later, it was down by 7 points. Same group of people, 42 to 49. In late January, it was down by 4 points. 44% now support abolishing ICE. 48% don't support abolishing ICE. Before Trump's term, the peak in the history of that number was 36% in August 2020, right at the tippy top of the George Floyd era when people were going nuts. And I was tearing my hair out about it was abolish ICE bullshit. Right? I must admit, in hindsight, I have not exactly the same views as I had then, but I was going, this is no, stop all the defunding the police, abolishing ICE stuff, please. Just do reforms while you can. You won't be able to do reforms for long. They didn't do reforms anyway. So the 36%, even then, now it's 44%. That is a big number. Oh, independents favour abolishing ICE 47% to 35%. It's getting so bad for Republicans that this week in Texas, they got pumped. Did you see this?
Yeah.
9th District of Texas, Fort Worth. Trump won this seat 58 to 41. The previous Republican won 60 to 40. Taylor Remmett, who's an Air Force veteran union leader, won 57 to 43. So that's a 34-point swing. He beat Lee Wambsgans, who's the Chief Communications Officer for Patriot Mobile, which, in case you're wondering, is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Patriot Mobile. Ding! The thing about this is, yes, special election, small numbers of people, then get swamped by many more voters in November. Of course. Of course, the Democrats are going to turn out more. Of course. But, Jared, this didn't take them by surprise. There was a first round of voting in November last year where the Dem was up 48 to 36. It didn't get to 50, so there's a runoff, which is what they just had. They ploughed money into this contest, Jared. They outspent him by a mile. Trump promoted the Republican not once, but 3 times on social media.
Please tell me you have the clip of when he was asked about it then.
I do.
Yes!
What is your reaction to that?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it. Somebody ran where?
In Texas, a special election for legislative the 9th state Senate seat.
I'm not involved in that. That's a local Texas race. You mean I won by 17?
You did.
And this person lost? Things like that happen.
Who's that? Is that the person that I promote 3 times on my social media feed? Still, yes, there'll be more voters in November. But more than 50% of the voters in this runoff, Jared, were Republican primary voters.
Yeah.
More than 50%. 58% of those voters in total voted for the Democrat, even though more than 50% were Republican primary voters.
Did you look at the demographics of who makes up this district?
There's a lot of Latinos. A lot of Latinos.
And suburbanites,
yeah.
Right? And that's where this is, the last few presidential races have been won and lost, right?
Yes.
And it's just like suburbanites.
Yeah.
That's what delivered Georgia to the Dems.
Yeah.
Latinos, that's what delivered a lot of votes around the country to Republicans. They neither suburbanites or Hispanic Americans are locked in for either party.
And do you know who comes out to vote in a proper election, like the midterms or the presidential elections, who isn't voting in primaries? Independents. Did you hear those numbers before about the independents? They're the guys who are going to be the extra numbers in November. So I'm not saying a 34-point swing reflects in any way what's going to happen in November. What I'm saying is that is still an indication that the Republicans are in real trouble.
Yeah.
The Latino area of Fort Worth swung by 50 points. 50. And people were wondering if the Latino groundswell in 2024 is going to be permanent or temporary. I got news for you. It's temporary. If the Republicans gerrymander face the kind of Latino numbers that they're facing there, they will lose 3 seats.
This is complete vindication of what I was saying about the gerrymandering all along.
Yes.
When you dilute those Republican districts from 20 to 5 to 7, 2 things. One, it increases the likelihood of you losing them in a bloodbath.
Yeah.
2, it's going to piss off the local Republicans who then have a more competitive race. And it's just, this is such an own goal for the Trump administration to be pushing this.
Since Trump took office, Democrats have flipped 8 Republican-held state legislative seats in special elections across 5 states. Republicans have flipped 0 Democratic seats, and the average swing across those 8 flips is 19 points for what it's worth. And the Cook Report has moved 18 seats towards the Democrats and 0 towards the Republicans since I last referred to them.
And now we are getting all the stories from Republicans saying, oh, maybe we won't keep the Senate in 2026.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
We'll see. We'll see. It's like this, that wasn't even, a few months ago, that was not something that anyone was even talking about. It looks very difficult for Dems to win it. Yeah. But still.
I'm not even sure they're going to win Maine, the Democrats, to be honest. I think Susan Collins is a very hard politician to beat. But we'll see.
We'll see.
We will see. They're looking a lot better now than they were 2 months ago, I'll tell you that. Jared, talk about foreign policy, because after Greenland, we've kind of talked a little bit about foreign policy, but then we had Iran, which we don't go too much into because that story's still going. Right now, in fact, they just had some talks, didn't they?
Had some talks on Friday.
It's in the shadow of my reading. I don't know.
And then there's also reports of asking U.S. family members of U.S. personnel to leave the region and to leave Iran.
The Europeans are doing that as well. Dave's going to talk a bit about Iran on Friday, I know, as well. But look, just generally, why don't you talk to me about foreign policy strategy during the holidays, because there's so much of it. And you can include Iran as part of that.
I wanted two things to highlight that we haven't really discussed. The national security strategy.
Yep.
And then the national defense strategy.
Yep.
National security strategy got released very quietly on December 4. That is something that the White House does, right? That is something that every administration does, usually in the first year or so of their administration. After that is the national defense strategy. So national security strategy, broad, whole world. National defense strategy is more focused and actually doesn't just talk about strategy, but actually is supposed to ostensibly talk about ways, ends, means, specifically in regards to defense.
Yeah, and about culture war, yeah. Might be getting ahead of myself there. Sorry, go on. Yes.
I can't stress enough how important the first Trump national security strategy was. Written by Nadia Shadlow, who is a broadly respected think tanker in the United States. She was the Deputy National Security Advisor. It was one of the first major U.S. government documents to shift from terrorism to great power competition and naming Russia, China as revisionist powers. And it really put, America first into some understandable language. In many ways, you could say it introduced the whole concept of strategic competition, which the Biden administration used and non-Trump officials use. Europe uses strategic competition. That's what the U.S. has with China. The first NDS of the Trump administration also was pretty pointed in terms of moving from interstate strategic competition, not terrorism. It really was, since the end of the Cold War, the first document to argue that. And anyone you talk to in the Pentagon will say that they look at that national defense strategy and they try to see how to implement it in their jobs, right? It is pretty big. And
I remember at the time it came out, it was definitely respected.
I can't say the same thing about the ones released in the last few months.
No.
So the National Security Strategy released December 4 very quietly without any fanfare. Usually there's a speech, usually there's a big announcement, and usually the president champions it. And that was in many ways what was done in the first Trump administration, despite the fact that it was quite obvious that Trump hadn't read it in the first Trump administration. But this one, this National Security Strategy was written by... That's not like subjective. That is like, it's quite obvious when you look at what he says about it. But this one was written by, or at least it's always a whole team that gets involved. But the lead pen is reportedly the work of Michael Anton. Do you remember him?
He's the Flight 93 guy. The guy who, this is 2016, wrote that there's like, people don't like Trump. Fair enough. He's rude. He's crude. He's groped women and all the rest of it. But Flight 93 was, for those who don't remember or have even heard of it, the flight that fought back against the 9/11 guys. There were like 3 flights that were 2 flights went into the World Trade Center. 1 flight went to the Pentagon. And another one was meant to go somewhere or other. I've forgotten where. And the people on the flight took it over. And they drove the plane into the ground to commit suicide, to fight back against terrorists, to stop it blowing up whatever they were going to blow up. And so they were like heroes. And he's saying, this is the Flight 93 scenario for America as a whole. We need to fight back against the terrorists, presumably the Democrats, before they destroy the whole country. Now, the analogy would suggest that they were going to drive America into the ground and explode it in a fireball, a heroic fireball, which maybe that's how it panned out. But that was his inspiration for people in 2016.
Thank you.
That's the guy, yeah?
You got it. Yeah. What else I think the Peppers will love about this guy, Michael Anton. Michael Anton also is a lover of men's fashion. Not just any lover of men's fashion. There's a great Politico story on this, was very heavily involved in Styleforum, which is an online style website. And he has written, I believe, extensively about Sebastian Gorka, about how much he hates what Sebastian Gorka
his
wears.
Fashions.
Yes. So
he doesn't really stand out to me, Sebastian Gorka, as being particularly unfashionable.
According to Michael Anton.
Okay.
Quite frustrating.
Really?
So yeah, there's quite a lot of online animus towards Sebastian Gorka. I'll give you a quote.
Yeah.
Menswear writer Christian Chensvold once met Anton in person and later reflected on the encounter, quote, Anton is a pleasant fellow, but when you meet him, you feel a cold scrutiny pass over you, like an open window in February. So
he's fresh, he's bracing.
So not only is he very active on the style forums, and he has all sorts of takes on Johnny Cochran's double-breasted suits to Tucker Carlson's bow ties to even Don Rumsfeld's attire. But anyways, he is the one who was more involved in this national security strategy. The one thing that I would take from it more than anything else to understand what it is, and this is something my boss has said, is that it is a Rorschach test, this national security strategy, because it's so obvious that it is a compilation of every school of thought in the Trump administration, and it is not coherent with each other, but it is coherent with what we know about this Trump administration and how they have very different ideas. And now what anyone in government will tell you about the value of these sort of strategies is not only is it a good way to put on paper what you're trying to do, but the effort of going through them is a good way to force, as a forcing function, to get the administration to think about these hard problems, and to actually put pen to paper and to win people to over to your side or to give some ground. It really is a great forcing function for getting some consensus and alignment on these really thorny issues. But the disconnect, you could say, between what is written in this document, the National Security Strategy, and then what has actually happened is quite shocking.
Sure.
It really emphasizes the non-interventionist stance.
Does it?
Yeah.
That's an unfortunate byproduct of coming out in early December.
But then it also asserts the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, or which some have called the Donroe Doctrine.
I bet he loves that.
Yeah. That took me way too long to get the first time I read it. I was like, Donroe? What? Oh, Donald Donroe. Got it. Thank you. And then it talks about how it has it has a desire for the U.S. to maintain unrivaled soft power. Yet it is the Trump administration is also gutting so many American soft power projection efforts.
For those who don't know, soft power is when you use things like donations and use diplomacy in order to create preeminence in people's decision-making processes. And the USAID is a classic example of projecting soft power, which was obviously gutted.
Yeah, so it was a term, sorry, I should have said, it's a term coined by a guy named Joe Nye, NYE, who came out with this concept and basically winning people over not through guns and violence, but actually through cultural diplomacy and like you said, humanitarian assistance and ways to win people over without fighting them, right? So the national security strategy is just what's the Australian term? A dog's breakfast.
Sure.
It has quite a wide variety of different concepts in it that are not coherent with each other. Then we have the National Defense Strategy, which is required by law to be issued by the Office of the Secretary of Defense every 4 years. And it basically talks about how the Pentagon's going to fulfill what the president has said in the National Security Strategy. A lot of people are talking about how this whole concept of the Trump administration prioritizing the homeland and the National Defense Strategy of this administration, similar to the Biden administration actually, also talks about the homeland. But I guess you could say that the execution of this homeland strategy is a bit different than the Biden administration.
Sure.
Now, what this all tells you, in my view, about the Trump administration's behavior thus far is not very much. These documents, unlike the first Trump administration, I don't think are going to be something we refer to for years to come in the way that we do, again, with the first Trump administration. The whole concept of strategic competition, revisionist powers, these are documents, in my view, that represent exactly where the Trump administration is right now. And this is what's really important. There's a lot of controversies about these documents, but perhaps no concept is more controversial than the way that the National Defense Strategy talks about China. You might be surprised to learn that the National Defense Strategy doesn't mention the word Taiwan. Literally not mentioned once.
Okay.
Because, in my view, similar to the National Security Strategy, Trump is looking to get a bilateral with Xi Jinping in April. And he is pulling back everything possible to not be antagonistic because he truly, like so many other U.S. presidents, thinks the sheer power of his personality and negotiating skills will win America some major concessions from the Chinese. So you see in the National Defense Strategy, China called an economic competitor. And it doesn't talk about strategic competition in the same way. It doesn't talk about the military dynamics. It doesn't talk about the fact that China has undergone the largest military buildup of any country since the end of World War II or its gray zone coercion. It completely has a different take on China that is, you could say, is pretty dovish. But again, I would be shocked if the Trump administration has the same approach to China in 6 months from now.
Yeah, I was going to ask, these, not so much the NSS, but the NDS in particular, is that meant to be useful to people from a budgeting perspective?
Yes.
Okay, so it is actually meant to be indicative of things that are happening.
Budgets and what sort of defense systems you're going to prioritize. Like, for example, do you want to buy the newest, shiniest kit, or do you want to prioritize efficiency? And do you want to prioritize support for Ukraine? Or do you want to prioritize littoral combat, like small island issues? You know what I mean? There's all sorts of different ways, and you can talk about like cutting back, like for example, or reforming the Marine Corps, right? Should the Marine Corps be ready for another Middle Eastern invasion, or should it be ready more for island combat and be more nimble? There's a lot of different ways that the NDS in particular really spells out what your priorities are going to be.
So the fact that there is basically no strategy in the strategy, and it's merely reflective of just thought bubbles from the president for this maybe 1 month period when it came out.
Give him credit, 3 months. Maybe.
Sure. That makes it not just a useless document, but an actively harmful document for what the purposes it's meant to achieve.
Yeah, you could say that, but I think there's a difference in this administration between those sorts of documents. Like, I don't think anyone is looking at either of these documents for guidance of what the Trump administration is going to do, or thinking that they will be relevant years down the track. I think even if they were to have a more coherent strategy, we all know this administration doesn't actually have one.
Yeah.
And that it just changes from day to day, and whoever is the last to influence Trump.
I'll ask you about two different areas of foreign policy that may or may not have come up in the NDS or NSS. I don't know. I didn't read them. But if they didn't, just your thoughts on how they fit into the broader picture. The first is the Board of Peace, which is a board that Trump seems to be a member for life on, like boss for life or director for life or whatever, which appears to be chock full of repressive governments. Like, I'm actually going to read out the entire board for you. Let's see how many of these names aren't right-wing populist allies, aren't autocracies, aren't countries that Trump already owns from previous negotiations, or aren't Middle Eastern kleptocratic countries. Okay, let's see. Argentina, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Bulgaria, El Salvador, Hungary, Indonesia, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, Mongolia, Morocco, Pakistan, Paraguay, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, United States, Uzbekistan. So, and there's also interest being expressed by Albania, Belarus, Cambodia, Egypt, Israel, Kuwait. Now, by my count, that's 3 countries that don't fit the pattern. Bulgaria, Indonesia, and Mongolia. And obviously most of Europe has already declined invitations. Is this just a thought bubble, or does this fit somewhere?
I think the main goal, from what I understand, is post-war Gaza. Right?
That's how it started, but now he's talking about using it for everything.
In the same way that when he was in Israel at the Knesset, he said, yeah, Jared Kushner and Witkoff, now your job is to go to Ukraine. He just sees this as like, oh, I have success here, perceived success here, I'm going to translate it to others. I think this is a way to make it about himself. I think this is a way to get a bunch of money with a $1 billion pay-to-play option or opportunity for these countries. Yeah, I don't see this as something that will outlast this administration whatsoever. But at the same time, what is the UN doing right now? It is arguably more feckless than ever, thanks to strategic competition.
Can you imagine if it did last past this administration and America had its representative on the Board of Peace, a person who wasn't a member of the current administration? That would be very strange. Anyway,
I will say, I've said this before, but like the only place where I see these sorts of things actually getting any traction on the ground potentially is the Middle East.
Yeah.
When you have a country that is vast majority is not democratic, if you can get the dictators on board, it is very different than Asia, Latin America, Europe, Africa. That's the only place where I could see it potentially having some value.
Okay. The other area I want to ask you about is very topical, which is the New START Treaty expiring on Wednesday.
Yeah.
That was formed in 2011. For those who don't know, It limited the strategic offensive nuclear forces of US and Russia to 1,550 deployed warheads and 700 delivery vehicles. When we say strategic offensive nuclear forces, we mean the long-range missiles and bombers that can cover thousands of miles, right? To put in context, 1,550 limit warheads on each side. In the 1980s, Russia and America had a total of over 20,000 warheads pointed at each other. So this treaty was good. The New START treaty was a good thing, right? Not even Russia wants this to go. Russia did suspend its participation in the treaty's information exchanges back in 2023 after the Ukraine war started. That was a little protest. But they kept the number caps in, the 1,550 number caps. Putin proposed in September to extend the limits of the treaty for another year, the number caps, in order to continue to negotiate. And that's exactly what they did back in 2009 before they formed New START. In July, Trump said the New START was not an agreement you want expiring. If you recall the year before, 2024, in the election campaign, he was talking a lot about avoiding World War III. He was a bit obsessed about nuclear war then. In January this year, he said, if it expires, it expires. He says he wants a better treaty that would also include Chinese nuclear weapons. China's rejected it, full stop. And China has way fewer nuclear missiles, even still, than America and Russia do. They got a little more than a tenth of the major powers. And people are seen, including China, as a poison pill. And in fact, it's also very short-sighted because when China eventually catches up, and I'm sure it will eventually, arms control is going to be impossible because Russia and China are going to want the same number of missiles as America in any deal. And America is going to want the same as Russia and China combined because America's going to be worried about Russia and China joining up, right?
Yep. No limits partnership.
Yeah. And so that means there's never going to be another arms control deal again under those terms when China catches up. If I was America, I'd be trying to get whatever deals you can get right now and then worry about the China issue down the track because they're not going to get anything else. It's about to end. So what is going on? Why has Trump gone from being this anti-nuclear, almost peacenik to not giving a shit about what happens to the New START treaty?
This is a debate that has been in D.C. long before Trump came onto the scene. There was a legitimate policy argument about whether it made sense for the Obama administration to go for a New START because a lot of more conservatives were saying the Russians were cheating. Why even agree to self-limit our arsenal if we know the Russians are cheating? And I think there remains a debate right now between, for example, the Brookings Institution, which is more left-leaning, not extreme left, but center-left, and the Heritage Foundation, which, as we all know, is now more of a political action committee, or known as a political action committee than anything else. Republicans in 2010, when the Obama administration was negotiating the New START treaty, were almost unanimous in saying that the Russians were cheating, do not give in, do not agree to this. And I think there have been some nonpartisan folks who have said, yeah, the Russians were cheating, but still, having this treaty is better than no treaty. That's the only way I can think of Trump changing tact, because traditionally the Republicans are against another START treaty because it is limiting U.S. power, and the Russians weren't playing along.
Okay. So this doesn't fit into a broader context. It's just on its own. Just of course not. Why am I even bothering?
Anyway, with Trump on Russia, you never know.
Yeah.
The Russians say that they wanted to do it, and that's like you said, that Russians were in favor of it. But you look at how they classified some missiles some ways and some not, and how they changed their classification. And the Americans are just they're blatantly cheating.
Yeah.
So why should we agree to anything with them when we know they're going to cheat?
Sure.
The other thing I'll say is that a lot of people, especially in Australia, say the U.S. needs to do a better job of having guardrails with China. And this plays to that, right? And how the U.S. wants China in START because it wants guardrails, it wants to have the red phones, which the U.S. had with the Soviets during the Cold War, right? But I don't think people appreciate enough that the U.S. has been asking for the red phones for the Chinese for many years. And when we have ostensibly had some sort of red phones, do you know what happens? No one in China picks up. The Chinese don't want to have guardrails because the Chinese are not happy with the status quo. The Chinese want to become, like so many other countries, including the United States, when it was growing more powerful, does not want to have limits on its power, right? So every time someone says the U.S. is acting recklessly or U.S. is trying to start a war with China, yes, I'm sure many Americans very well may want that. But in terms of the national security apparatus wanting to have some red lines, wanting to have those red telephones, wanting to have more communication with the military, they've been asking for that across administrations, but it doesn't matter, Republican or the Democrats, the Chinese have not agreed to them. Let's not forget the spy balloon during the Biden administration. The Chinese were not picking up the phone when the Biden administration was calling. The military, the U.S. military at the time came out saying as much, right? And trying to have any sort of guardrails, any sort of ways to decrease tensions. That's not in China's interest right now when they want to slowly increase tensions and change the status quo. What does China want with Taiwan? They don't want a war. They just want to take it without fighting.
And Iran. Do you have anything to say about Iran, either in the context of what you've been talking about or just in general?
I think with Iran, I'm afraid of us saying something and then it'll go out of...
Well, that's one of the reasons I want to keep that for Dave.
Yeah, but I will just say, with numbers looking at and we're only getting video out now with 30,000 or more deaths of Iranian protesters. That is one of the largest amount of deaths we've seen in such a short period of time in decades. I think we have to go back to like World War II to see that number of deaths in such a short period of time. Now, the question is, what is so many people focus on, and what I find personally frustrating is so many people focus on what are the targets for the U.S. and the U.S. should be hitting these naval assets or these military assets. And I don't, sure, they can go for more military assets. The IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, they run the country and that would be hurtful to them. But would that change the country or that save lives? I don't know. What I do know is that we've learned this from Libya, and is that, in my view, there needs to be pressure on the elites. There needs to be pressure, in my view. We've seen so many protests across the country from students over the last few decades, from students, from reformists, from women, from youth. Now everyone, right? You had people that just economically, it's not sustainable. This is teetering on the edge, the whole country, right? But what is the Trump administration doing to compel the elites to leave? This is, I think, what many in the Obama administration say was a mistake with Libya, is that they just went for going after Gaddafi, but they didn't do anything to incentivize them leaving or to give Gaddafi an off-ramp. Because let's not forget, Gaddafi denuclearized, right? He willingly denuclearized. Yeah. How can you compel a dictatorial regime in Iran to basically leave? You can use sanctions. They have their family and networks in Canada, Australia, even the U.S., Europe, and the protesters are saying as much. The U.S. and like-minded allies and partners can go after those family members for, terrible human rights atrocities committed in Iran. But are they? I don't know. Right now, we have what Trump loves. Everyone just waiting on him to decide what happens next in Iran. But in terms of what's in the national interest of the Iranian people, I don't think that necessarily is that.
I don't want to say much because it's going to change. But all I would say is that it'd be nice to know what Trump actually cares about with Iran. Because you mentioned the 30,000 protesters killed.
I will say it's a range. I think the government is saying maybe 5.
I was going to say somewhere between 5 and 30,000 are the numbers have thrown around. Could be more, whatever. But my point is, before that happened, and I'll show you all this stuff when we talk about it on Friday. Before that happened, Trump was putting out warnings saying, we got your back, Iran. If he kills you, he's in trouble. Here's a red line. Don't kill those protesters. And then he just went and plowed them. Yeah. And then Trump didn't talk about it again. And then he started talking about nuclear stuff. And then he starts doing something else, and then he starts doing something else, and he just keeps on changing what his red line is. I don't know what he cares about. Like, and there's a bit of that with Venezuela as well, where you're going, what does he care about here?
What do you actually want?
Like he presumably wants something, but with Trump, there's always a game where he just talks in pretexts, and you never know what he actually believes.
Yep.
And you don't know what it is with Iran. And it's hard for Iran to negotiate with anyone when they don't know what it is they're negotiating about.
Now, do you know, you just said the key words I think very well may compel Trump to act more than anything else. You're involving the Middle East and red lines. And that is one of the top Republican talking points against Barack Obama in Syria, where he said there were red lines, and then he ignored them. And the Republicans say the Obama administration's ignoring of those red lines.
That were chemical weapons, the red lines.
That's right. And the use of chemical weapons on the Syrian population enabled the Republican talking point. They say that enabled Putin to invade Crimea. And that was the weak American administration. That is what that led to, whereas Trump is tough and not going to allow such behavior to occur. We shouldn't forget, though, that the first time Putin invaded any country was not during the Obama administration. Do you remember the first one?
It was Georgia.
Exactly. And when was that?
It was Bush.
Exactly. And what did the U.S. administration do about that? Exactly.
Yeah.
So a pox in all their houses.
Anything else on foreign policy before we move on?
I can talk all day on foreign policy, but I'm sure we have a lot more.
We do.
Stats Nugget.
I got two quick stats, and an announcement of what my pet peeve will be in 2026. This is not a prediction, this is a fact. This is as safe as houses, a statement of what is going to annoy me all year. This is about crime. The improving situation with fentanyl deaths and crime rates has not tailed off recently. It's been improving for a number of years. Preliminary data from the CDC has found about 35% fewer US drug deaths now in the year ending August 2025 than at the peak in 2023. That's a big drop. Also, according to the data from the Council on Criminal Justice, in 35 large cities sampled from December 2025 over the 12-month period beforehand, homicides dropped 21% last year. The Council on Criminal Justice is projecting that, assuming that is representative of the rest of the nation, and people are expecting it will be, that the homicide rate in 2025, the official homicide rate in 2025, is very likely to be the lowest rate since 1900. Yeah. Now, it didn't just start going down. It's been going down for a while. In fact, the trend is, apart from 1 year when Trump was president in 2020, I'm not blaming him. The trend has been down for decades.
Yeah.
But what's happened in the last couple of years is they've resumed the trend from before COVID. My pet peeve. I tell you all this because it's already annoying me and the year has just begun. I've spent the last 3 years talking about fentanyl deaths going down and crime rates going down, and trying to speculate about why that might be, because it's not a simple answer.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated question. For those who have been following the podcast and Planet America, you would have heard me have a dip at this over and over again. I don't want to take another dip now. I will come back to it another time. But the important thing is, during that whole period, the Trump people were either ignoring those numbers or they were saying they were just bullshit. They were saying they were made up. They were saying it was fake news. Now, all of a sudden, the very same people are putting out those very same stats, and they've decided those stats are gold. And also, they are solely because of Trump's immigration agenda. Because he killed all those people in Venezuela, like in the Venezuelan waters, in the Caribbean. So that ended the fentanyl trade, even though this is from August 2024 to August 2025, these numbers I just read out, before anyone was killed in the Caribbean. But anyway. And the crime is just because he's deported all the criminals. Yeah, that's what's going on there, yeah. Oh my God, it's going to drive me crazy, Jared. These are trends that have been going for decades, And as the year goes on, they're going to get louder and louder, these voices, because these are the only stats these guys can rely on, and they're going to keep on delivering. And every single time we're going to hear about the success of the immigration agenda from the right, and it's going to drive me crazy.
Have you looked at polling on Americans' sentiment towards crimes and how they're feeling towards crime and whether they feel like crime is going down?
Don't they perpetually think it's going up?
In the last year or two, it's gone down.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
So
that's great news.
Gallup in October of last year, they said that crime is seen as less serious for second straight year.
Wow.
So there you go. Maybe it's
great news.
It's a long tail.
Let's talk for the next hour or so. Let's talk Minnesota and ICE and immigration. I'm not sure we're going to get through all my section here. I got a lot to say about immigration all the time, Jared, but I'll do my best. I assume everyone who's watching this has seen the Alex Preddy and Renee Good videos. If you're into American politics, you've seen them. I will show them again. I will give you my opinion on them. I will ask Jared his opinion on them, but I don't want to focus on them because Standard News focuses on them. Play America focuses on them. PEP is to talk about the stuff that everyone else isn't focusing on. I want to, first of all, before we even talk about those shootings, I want to focus on why this operation exists in the first place. Because honestly, it's not clear. J.D. Vance says this.
Well, right now we're focused on Minneapolis because that's where we have the highest concentration of people who have violated our immigration laws.
Guys, that's bullshit. Okay, just be clear. There are 100,000 illegal immigrants in Minnesota. That's 2% of their population. According to Pew, there are 78 American metro areas that have higher percentages of undocumented residents than Minneapolis does. Would you care to guess number one?
It is going to be in a red state. It is.
Yes.
Texas?
Nope, it's Miami. Miami, as opposed to Minnesota with 2%, is 13% illegal immigrant. I'm not seeing any raids on Miami. So why are they sending in 3,000 agents, 2,000 ICE agents, 1,000 Border Patrol agents? That number has gone down since. We'll get to that. That's 6 times the local police force size to crack down on a tiny number of people who really aren't creating a massive issue in Minnesota at all. Jared, why does this operation exist?
Because they're Somalians. That's what they think. The issue at hand, they're the embodiment of the immigrant that they detest the most, the darkest, the most non-Christian. And then on top of it all, you had, as you said earlier in the show, the issue of the social services being used by mostly Somalian groups.
That's certainly the first reason that they gave. Way back when, there was a huge focus about a month ago on fraud amongst those running daycare centres in Minneapolis and just Medicaid fraud in general. They weren't all Somalis. A lot of them were Somalis, let's be honest. That wasn't a beat up. They were. According to the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, since 2018, 14 Medicaid services that cost the state $18 billion have been deemed high risk for fraud. He said he expects at least half of that $18 billion to have been fraudulently withdrawn. In reality, that seems like a stretch to me. $9 billion, I don't think it's going to be $9 billion, but over $1 billion at least has already been legitimately called into question, not by the Trump administration, by courts. There have been federal charges already levied in the past, before the Trump administration, against 92 people, 80 of whom were of Somali backgrounds. That's why I say, yeah, look, there is a Somali factor here. With 62 of them convicted. That's real money, and that's real fraud, okay? That's not a beat-up. It did get full beat-up attention, though, when YouTuber Nick Shirley covered it just after Christmas. I think it was Christmas Day or Boxing Day the video came out. In particular, what was just golden publicity for him was that one of the dodgy centres that ended up closing after his video exposed them was the Quality Learning Centre that misspelt the word learning.
So this is Quality Leering Center. I meant to say Quality Learning Center.
Don't open
They
up!
said they spelt learning wrong.
Here. Don't open up!
How do you have ice here, ma'am? I'm literally a YouTuber.
The most ironic thing about that video is that Nick Shirley himself, isn't exactly the Oxford Dictionary. Let's just have a look at this clip.
Who do you think are the 3 most benevolent billionaires?
What do you mean by the word benevolent?
Just well-intentioned, positive billionaires who you think are creating, net positive societal progress.
Look, I don't want to beat up on someone not being super well educated, not knowing words like benevolent, but, he's the one who introduced the Quality Learning Centre. So, if we're being fair.
Can I just ask, sidebar, why haven't you ever had that Channel 5 Andrew Callaghan on either PEP or on Planet America?
I don't know much about the guy, to be honest.
The guy who interviewed Hunter Biden?
Yeah, well, that's quite recent. We've been making the show for a long time.
He's been having his show for a long time. In terms of quirky shows with really seeing quite a diverse array of Americans and being willing to interview a diverse array of Americans as well, I think you'd get a kick out of him if you check him out. Channel 5.
I might get him on PEP. Why hasn't he interviewed us?
Great question.
One of the things that's mixed this all up as well is, of course, Ilhan Omar, who's a Democratic House rep from Minnesota. She's of Somali background. She has some questions to answer about her financial disclosures as well. She lists amongst her assets a winery, and her husband has a venture capital management firm. The venture capital management firm declared $15,000 to $50,000 of income in 2023, no income in 2024. Yet it was listed as being worth $1,000 to $1,000 in 2023 in terms of value, and $5 million to $25 million in 2024. The winery declared up to $50,000 worth of income in 2024, but it went from being worth $15,000 to $50,000 in 2023 to being worth $1 million to $5 million in 2024. How that happens is not clear. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not a business guy. I could believe that there's an explanation, especially with the financial business. I mean, God knows how that works. Republicans have accused her of suddenly being worth $30 million by adding those two upper numbers together, the $25 million and the $5 million. That's incredibly dishonest because they could just as easily have added the two lower numbers and said she's worth $6 million. But anyway, I'm not accusing her of fraud. I said she has questions to answer. I mean that. She has questions to answer. I'm not saying she's fraudulent. I have no idea what's going on. It's odd to me that her winery doesn't seem to exist in the real world. It has no phone number. There's no physical winery at the supposed address.
And as a practicing Muslim, that she has a winery at all.
Conservatives have made that point. Its social media isn't doing anything. Its website isn't working. There's no obvious wine available for sale, and it basically disappeared from the internet entirely recently. That all seems a bit fishy. But it's being investigated. It should be investigated, and it is being investigated. It's been investigated by the House Oversight Committee. She was also, by the way, investigated by the Biden DOJ. They said they couldn't find enough evidence to lay any charges, and the investigation apparently stalled. The Trump DOJ is having another bite. I'm happy to wait for those investigations to pan out. Let's see the evidence they've got. Let's see what they have to say. I'm not hanging her, but either way, Trump seems to be conflating his hatred of Ilhan Omar with this welfare fraud story in Minnesota, and he's decided that all Somalians have to go to crack down on their fraud.
We're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain and do nothing but bitch, we don't want them in our country.
That clip was from the announcement of the operation. That's originally what this operation was supposed to be about. But it makes no sense. Almost 58% of the Somalis in Minnesota were born in America. Of the foreign-born Somalis, 87% are naturalised US citizens. Nationally, by the way, about 73% of Somali immigrants are naturalised US citizens as well, according to the Census Bureau. So, I whipped out the calculator. 95% of the 80,000 Somalians in Minnesota are American citizens. Most of those fraudsters that we referred to before are indeed American citizens. Illegal immigrants can't claim Medicaid. It's hard to be fraudulent. So what does this have to do, Jared, with ICE? That's why you send in the FBI, not ICE if they're American citizens. And by the way, illegal immigrants on a per capita basis are responsible for taking less welfare than native-born people are anyway. Of course, that's not a surprise. They're not eligible for most of the welfare that native-born people are. I'm not saying they're saints. I'm just saying that that's just kind of logical. This also is transparently not the actual reason because of a few things. Firstly, if Trump was worried about welfare fraud, he wouldn't have dropped the enforcement of repayments for welfare fraud in Mississippi when he took over, that the Biden administration had put in place. And if you wanted to crack down on fraud in Minnesota, I'll tell you where you'd start. Not with the Somalis. You'd start with the health insurance giant United Health Group, which, guess where it's headquartered? Minneapolis. And according to a report from Chuck Grassley's office, they've been inflating risk adjustment codes on their 8 million Medicare Advantage customers to the tune of, wait for it, $84 billion a year. They're in Minneapolis. That's a good place to start for welfare fraud, I would have thought, Jared. But they haven't started there, and ICE can stay home and put their feet up while you crack down on the UHG group. The second reason, in my view, that this is obviously bullshit.
If we can just quickly add the caveat that crackdown in terms of financial malfeasance, not actually crack down on any of those executives at that insurance company.
Of course. Even if emotionally there's a Somali element to the reason for the operation, I don't think it all checks out logically. The second reason, which has come up, is that Minnesota is a sanctuary state. This has come up recently. A lot of Democrats have made some of the points that I've already made about Somalis. They say it's all a pretext, and the real reason ICE is in Minnesota is because Trump is staging a temper tantrum against sanctuary states. Sanctuary states, for those who don't know, they're states where police forces are instructed not to work with ICE and the Border Patrol. They often manifest themselves in criminals being let free after they serve their time, rather than the police telling ICE to pick them up from the prison so they can be immediately deported. Right. Now, just to be clear, sanctuary states are 100% constitutional. The Supreme Court has affirmed that many times. In 1997, in Prince, that's not the love symbol, that's PRINTZ, versus the United States. Scalia wrote that one. I don't think the Supreme Court's about to turn Scalia down. It's called the non-commandeering doctrine. It suggests under the 10th Amendment that no state can be made to enforce federal law themselves. The feds enforce federal law. The states enforce state law. The states can help enforce federal law if they want to, but you can't make them. Which means even if Congress tried to pass a law against sanctuary states, like Trump keeps on demanding, the Supreme Court would strike it down immediately. In fact, the federal government, they can't even heavily induce cooperation. A lot of people don't realize this. They can't even bribe states to work with them. Obamacare got done by this because what originally with the Medicare expansion, Obama was giving them a pot of money, the red states, to expand Medicaid. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. You just have to give them a pot of money and ask them, pretty please, can you expand Medicaid? And a lot of them said no. They said giving them the pot of money as it was too much pressure. So what that means is two things. One, no matter how much it pisses off Trump, sanctuary states and cities are here to stay. And two, Trump can't cut off their funding, no matter how much he says that he's going to. And he says it all the time and writes executive orders to that effect. Three, while states can't be made to enforce federal law, they're also not allowed to get in the way of the feds enforcing federal law. You have to let them do it. Right. Okay. So that's all set up as sanctuary states. Let's get back to Minnesota. Is Trump holding these raids just to pressure Minnesota into not being a sanctuary state? Do you have a theory on that?
I don't really have a theory on that. I'm
That's
not,
fair.
because to be honest, I more know there's not a clearly from my understanding of it, you know this better than I do. It's not clearly defined about the difference between sanctuary city and sanctuary state.
It's an excellent point to pick up on, Jared, because I don't think it's true. Because Minnesota is not a sanctuary state, as much as Trump keeps on saying it is. Governor Walz has said this a million times, and everyone just ignores him. For instance, a few weeks back, Walz had a nice phone call with Trump, which we read about, and they were saying nice things about each other. If you read Walz's statement, which no one did, he added, the governor reminded President Trump that the Minnesota Department of Corrections already honors federal detainers by notifying ICE when a person committed to its custody isn't a U.S. citizen. There is not a single documented case of the department's releasing someone from state prison without offering to ensure a smooth transfer of custody. Now, Minneapolis is a sanctuary city, as you say. There's a difference. Some of the counties are sanctuary counties. So it's not like the point is completely made up, but almost all of the serious criminal illegal immigrants are in state prisons because almost all the serious crimes are in state prisons. You don't put people in a local jail if they committed a murder. You put them in the state prison, right? Almost no one ever mentions that Minnesota does cooperate. It's just MAGA propaganda to make Minnesota seem less reasonable. Just go on and on and on. Oh, they're letting the criminals go. They're letting the criminals go. In fact, it pissed Minnesota off so much, they even created a website called the Combating Department of Homeland Security Misinformation Site. That's it there. That website has detailed the way that the feds have claimed 68 of the criminals that Minnesota handed over to them directly from prison as arrests that they made on their raids in the last month. And then they put those people on the top of their worst of the worst lists to justify the operation in Minnesota. They are so dishonest. They're not arresting any of those people, any of those murderers and rapists they keep on talking about on the streets of Minnesota. Every one of them was handed to them by the state in prison. And even in sanctuary districts, in Minneapolis and sanctuary counties, everyone has different rules. And in Minnesota, state law says that they all have to contact ICE whenever a non-citizen is convicted of a felony. If ICE is lazy, they won't keep track of them, but they can. Like, it's the law in Minnesota for every single city and district. So, is this controversy all completely made up? No. Because while it's bullshit to say Minnesota releases convicted murderers and rapists into the community rather than working with ICE, ICE reckon there are more than 1,360 inmates with detainers in Minnesota that are not being honoured. So what's happening there? Firstly, the state prison system, which has most of them, has only about 270 non-citizen inmates in total. So there's something funny going on there. What's happening is ICE have a slightly broader definition of criminal than everyone else. They want Minnesota to hand over immigrants in their local and state jails who haven't yet been tried. That's what they want. Who have just been accused of a crime. And also for pretty much any offence. They don't care. Speeding, doesn't matter what the situation is. They just want them. They want bodies to deport. That's what they're looking for. And you can tell by their bodgy stats. Our old friend, Tricia McLaughlin, when talking about Illinois the other day, she said this. From January 20 to the end of January, Illinois authorities released 1,768 criminal illegal immigrants into the community. And she said out of those numbers, there were 5 homicides, 141 assaults, 23 burglaries, 4 robberies, 24 drug offences, 15 weapons offences, and 10 sexual predatory offences, Jared. 1,768 is a much bigger number than 5, 141, 23, 4, 24, 15, 10. That's 222 people, even if every one of those crimes is just one person to a crime. Where are the other 1,546 criminal illegal immigrants coming from, Jared? ICE won't tell us, but I think we know. It's people who've accused of shit and people with speeding tickets. It's people with just stuff that doesn't matter. They're liars. They're massively deceptive. You can't trust a thing they say. Either way, I don't think the Sanctuary City thing is actually their real motivation. Once again, it's another pretext. There is a third potential reason that's about making a blue state buckle under. Because just last week, there was a suggestion that Trump basically wants to make Minnesota his bitch. The example of this was during the elections push, which we'll be talking about in the next PEP, not this one. Pam Bondi last week said that if Tim Walz gives the Trump administration full access to the state's Medicaid and SNAP records so that her office can efficiently investigate fraud, so now the DOJ's onto it, and he ended the largely fictional sanctuary state policy. She didn't say fictional, that's my little addition. And he handed over all state voter registration records to Trump. They'll end the operation. Now, that's flat blackmail. We're talking about a lot of private data there. They don't have the right to hand over.
Not just any data, voter data.
That's right.
That's the big thing more than anything else that would be unprecedented to my knowledge.
It would be. Now, she can go to court to get that data if she wants to, like she's supposed to. But is that why the operation started as blackmail? I'm not sure. They didn't even mention this until the last week. I reckon that's a happy bonus. Tell you what I think, and then to see what you think about this. I think this is about the internet. I think this is about the Trump administration being run by, with, and for Twitter. That's what I think. I think that there is no strategy. There's no long-term game plan. There's no 4D chess. They're just trying to keep Cat Turd 2 happy. That's what I think. And I think it's pathetic. And I think right-wing Twitter was obsessed with Minnesota in December. Even though I wasn't following American politics, all the right-wingers I'd cultured my feed were just foaming at the mouth about Minnesota in December. They've always hated Ilhan Omar. They've always hated Tim Walz. They've been obsessed with Minnesota fraud and especially Somalian fraud for years. I think Trump was always looking for a place to launch an immigration raid next to keep deportation numbers ticking over. And I think he just wanted to keep the internet happy. He said, yeah, cool, those guys. Our buddies. Yeah, high five, guys. Let's go get those Minnesotans that you hate. It's depressing, but I reckon that's all that's going on. What do you reckon?
Do you remember when Osama bin Laden was captured, killed, and then put out to sea? Do you remember there's that viral photo of the Obama administration, including President Obama, Vice President Biden, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, looking at the screen?
I do remember.
Right. There was also video as well as photos of the operation to get Maduro out of Venezuela.
This is in my reading shadow. I don't know this.
Okay.
Yep.
And they're at Mar-a-Lago.
Yep.
And you can see that they've blacked out the Mar-a-Lago ballroom, I presume. I'm not sure what room it was. They also had Dan Cain, I believe, and a few others with laptops and everything. And they were showing on the screen on one of the laptops what was on the laptop, right? Do you know what it was? No. This is like military operations and a very complex one, which I hope you cover the fact that to this day, I don't have a very detailed TikTok of what happened in Venezuela, or how they pulled it off, and what sort of technology they use. There's all sorts of rumors about what they use. Anyway, on that screen for everyone to see, what was on his laptop? X.com with a search Venezuela.
That's amazing. That's a great thing to add. I'm telling you, they're controlled by Twitter. It's so depressing.
I can't emphasize enough how important it is to break through. If you want to see any change, you have to watch what right-wing Twitter says, right? And that is the only place where things are breaking through. And when Fox News goes or right-wing Twitter goes, that's when Trump loses it. And you saw on the killings in Minnesota that Fox News was like, no, come on, you can't deny what we're just watching. Come on. Yeah, that is the way to tell if and when Trump moves on something. It's when Twitter or Fox News moves.
Yeah.
Just to be fair, is there a chance that when that Maduro capture was happening, I know one of the things that I always do for live news is just constantly refresh Twitter to see if people are posting footage of the event happening. Is there a chance that they might have been doing something like that?
Sure.
But wasn't the operation like a top secret kind of operation? It wasn't like there
were explosions and fireworks happening.
It wasn't like
locals were filming
parachutes on the beach kind of.
No, but it was an urban operation, right? Okay, and so there were people who were reporting similar to Bin Laden. Like one of the ways we found out about Bin Laden was that a Pakistani Twitter user posted about it, right? About explosions. So yes, that is very true to see, but it's like that is not what I would.
Not great. They also had other ways of getting vision of what was happening.
Let's give Lockie props.
That was a great to be fair.
Yeah, it's fair enough. That was fair.
Very fair.
Drink.
Okay, let's go into the shootings themselves. As I said, I don't want to spend much time on the shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy because that's what the news covered as well. I'm sure you've seen the footage 1,000 times. Let's look at the first video of Renee Good. This is the wide shot. This is not the shot from the mobile phone camera of Jonathan Ross. This is the wide shot from one of the bystanders.
Now at 11, outrage growing across the country after an ICE agent shot and killed a woman in Minneapolis today.
The conventional wisdom that's kind of solidified, I think, generally, since that happened is that maybe that the police officer can get away with saying the first shot was that he was scared and defending himself of potentially being run over. But the second, third shot, the car's well on its way at that point in time, and that's ridiculous. That's the conventional wisdom. What's your thoughts before I say what I think?
If you watch his footage,
should we do that? Should we do it? We can go straight there. That's the next video. So let's watch his footage.
Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the car.
That's his footage, including the immortal phrase "fucking bitch," which. Yeah, I think a lot of people have noted that, and not enough. That's yes.
You can also notice that he changes hands, right? So one hand is holding the phone, and before she even drives off, he switches hands to get his gun out. So he was going for the gun.
That's an excellent observation.
I'm not the first to make that observation.
But still, you're the first to say it on PEP.
But yeah, so it looked, there's a number of signs, if you watch that video enough, that don't look great.
Yeah, look, I've got to say, to me, while the conventional wisdom is that the Preddy one is just really, really, really obviously over the line, and the conventional wisdom is maybe the first shot wasn't so bad on Renee Good, but the other two. My view is actually opposite. I actually think the Renee Good one is blatantly unreasonable for a number of reasons. And you just gave me one more. The one about changing the hands. That's a great observation. In my mind, there is zero doubt that the front of Good's car had already well passed the officer when he shot the first bullet. He was shooting through her side window. It is impossible to shoot through a side window and be under threat of being run over by that car unless that car is performing a trick of some kind, right? Unless it's driving sideways somehow. Right, if it's driving forward, you're out of danger by the time you're shooting through a side window. That's the first shot. I think he was already well safe. I totally get why he could have been nervous that he was about to get run over. Those nerves should have been gone by the time he fired his first shot. That, to me, was a shot in anger, not in self-defense. After being outraged that he was almost run over. It's like, yeah, I'll get you, effing bitch, which is his thought immediately after he shoots. So to me it's very hard to convict a police officer or a law enforcement officer of being unreasonable when shooting. I've watched a lot of these cases over the years, and it needs to be really blatant. But to me, that's as close to blatant as you can get. That's pretty close, I reckon.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. To be honest, as an American, I was a part of me was shocked when Derek Chauvin was convicted of George Floyd's death or murder, because I had become so accustomed to police officers not being convicted.
They very rarely are.
Those sorts of crimes.
And we're going to be talking about that soon. But they very rarely are. According to CBS, people, 54% to 28% said the shooting was unreasonable. So 54% said it was unreasonable, 28% said it was reasonable. If it was, in my world, those numbers would be much more lopsided. Let me also remind you of DHS's use of force policy. Employees may use force only when no reasonably effective, safe and feasible alternative appears to exist, and may use only the level of force that is objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances confronting the officer at the time force is applied. So what that means is you only shoot people to save your own life. That's the only reason why. That simply did not apply in this case. And I should also add the video from the ICE agent's cell phone. A lot of the right have used that angle because it looks kind of scary when he's like jerks. But that could mean he's getting run over or he's just jumping. It's just the camera shaking, that's all. So that's why it looks so bad. Once again, I understand why he'd be scared, why he'd jump, why he'd shirk and shake his camera. But the wide shot shows he wasn't getting run over. It's very simple.
I don't know any police officer that has watched that video and said he behaved, even before the shooting, that what he did was right. Standing in front of a car?
You never stand in front of a car if you're a law enforcement officer.
And there's so many issues on this. There's a debate about ICE training and how moderate Dems are saying we need better training for ICE, and then the progressive Dems are saying get rid of ICE altogether. Go ahead.
Jonathan Ross was in customs and ICE for 20 years.
Yeah, he's not a newbie.
No, he's very experienced.
Yeah. And some people have said that the ICE tactics, it's remnants of the global war on terror. It's the imperial boomerang, I've heard people say. I think a lot of veterans would disagree. I think a lot of veterans would say that sort of behavior, not only would it be reckless to themselves, it was dangerous to their colleagues, it would have gotten them killed, and they actually did prosecute war crimes. Which, by the way, Hegseth supported until he became more of a culture warrior.
Yeah.
Let's not forget his turn on the whole concept of war crimes, where 99% of the time, maybe not 90%, the majority of the time, they are charged with war crimes because of the testimony of their fellow soldiers.
Yeah.
I will say, I don't think it's necessarily an imperial boomerang because I don't think that is importing the global war on terror. But I think what we have imported is in U.S. police forces in particular is so much surplus military gear, and cops then taking that to turn themselves into soldiers. And that, I think, is a cultural issue that has come from a very distinct policy issue of saying, hey, we can use all the surplus gear from Iraq and on our streets, which I don't think has led to optimal outcomes.
Let's talk about the Preddy shooting now. Let's just look at that one. I should say, though, homicide. It's been declared a homicide by the Hennepin County Medical Examiner. So let's look at that.
The fuck, people? The fuck is wrong with you? Honestly.
Okay, what's your take on that, Jared?
I think that was a pretty clear video, in my opinion. The more you watch it, the clearer it becomes about what happens, and which makes the immediate response from the administration pretty hard to understand. It goes back to what we started at the beginning with, talking about Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
And how it seemed like everyone took their talking points from him initially, because, again, of his power and proximity to Donald Trump. And yet that position, I think, is untenable with that video. Like
I said before, I have more sympathy in that circumstance than the Renee Good one. I think the Renee Good one is just blatant. I think this one is clear, but not as blatant. What we're seeing there is a bit of a clusterfuck, I think. I mean, you can see what's happening, but there's a lot of arms and legs and Now, to be clear, Alex Preddy had no business being in the middle of that law enforcement action at the time, right? He wasn't being violent or obstructive, despite the comments made afterwards by the DHS. He was just helping a lady up who got pushed over by a CBP officer, right? And that was a very aggressive push, by the way, in response to someone blowing a whistle. But anyway, let's just note that. That's the start of the whole thing, someone getting pushed over for no reason at all. Anyway, Preddy got himself involved, and if they ordered him to leave and then they arrested him for obstruction, they would have had the right to do that. I mean, that would be a tough-ass call, but strictly speaking, he was obstructing. So if they gave him a warning. So fair enough. Their reaction to jump all over him without warning, way over the top for an obstruction. After that, things then got a bit more difficult, I think. He wasn't armed. He wasn't resisting violently when they were all over him. He was resisting a little, but not violently. It was a mess of arms and legs. And one of the officers allegedly yelled repeatedly, "He's got a gun." Now, in that environment where there's arms and legs and someone's yelling, "He's got a gun," one of the officers did disarm Preddy before he was shot. He did have a gun. They took the gun out. But I don't think it would be impossible for one of the officers to miss that in the commotion. Like when you watch it, you have to watch it pretty carefully to see the gun being removed, right? The first officer to shoot was right behind where the gun was. So of all the officers to see it, they should have been the one. But were they looking in that direction at the exact moment? Arms and legs, I could see them missing it. I don't think it's a hard thing for a lawyer to argue in court, right? In fact, right after the shooting, one of the agents asked where Preddy's gun was, implying they didn't know that one of the officers had taken it. So, to me, there's a bit more confusion there than there was in the Rene Good shooting, which is why I keep on saying I think the Rene Good shooting is different. So, I don't think it was provably unreasonable in that precise moment for an officer to panic and shoot, depending on how it's argued in court. Not good practice, though. Definitely not good practice. And in terms of, look, let's put it this way. The moment shouldn't have existed. Everything the officers did were wrong leading up to the moment. But when the moment did exist, I think the first shots were less blatant as unreasonable acts than the Rene Good shooting was, in my view. But then they shot him 10 times. When he obviously wasn't retaliating, he obviously wasn't reaching for a gun, that to me is extremely excessive by anyone's definition. So at the end of the day, I think this is unreasonable as well. I've made the arguments they would make in court, and I think those arguments are makeable. But at the end of the day, I think it's still unreasonable, even though I'd be less than surprised if those officers got off in court, if they get to court, I would say. Do you have any thoughts about any of that?
No, beyond the fact that this is, I loved the response from the Second Amendment types. And it reminded me of another Minnesota shooting of a man named Philando Castile. You remember that?
I do.
And he was shot by police officers. And the difference is that he was black. And I do not believe that the National Rifle Association championed Castile in the way that they have stood up to Trump in this instance.
Yep, that might be solely a function of race. It might be America has improved in that respect. Probably race. But throw it out there. You've mentioned the DHS reaction. Let's talk about that. Because strangely, this might sound weird. You're talking about people who are murdered here. But I honestly think the DHS reaction, the reaction from Noam and Steve Miller and Bivens was almost more of the reason people were angry than the shootings themselves. I think Americans get used to police shooting people and law enforcement, and like you say, they sadly expect them to just, here's another shooting, we move on.
Yeah.
But it was the callous, inhuman, blatant gaslighting, I think, that really set people off. It was just so shameless because the videos were already out as well. They were lying in such an obvious, insulting way. They refused to take any responsibility or, in fact, even care about the people who died. Both cases. In Renee Good's case, the FBI didn't even bother investigating the shooting properly. When the FBI agent tried to investigate the shooting, as you should investigate every shooting death, they were pressured to drop the investigation and to investigate Renee Good's widow instead, because she supposedly impeded an ICE operation while her wife was getting shot. That caused 6 Minnesota DOJ prosecutors to resign in protest. They called both Good and Pretty domestic terrorists, which we'll come to later. At first, Greg Bivens suggested the shooters weren't even going to take any leave. They're just going to keep on going. Eventually, they were placed on administrative leave, at least. They refused to name them. They actively obstructed any investigations by the federal government or even the state of Minnesota. They wouldn't let them have access to the crime scene. They didn't notify the families of the victims. Pretty's family learnt about his death from a reporter. Imagine that. They didn't take 1 second to show humanity. There's no thoughts and prayers moment. Usually with shootings, there's a thoughts and prayers moment, and then we come out and spin, right? We know how it works. It's grisly, it's horrible and cynical, but that's how it works. The Trump administration didn't bother with thoughts and prayers. Bang! Second one, we're getting into spin. Who gives a shit that 2 people just died? Let's get into the spin. This was, let's get into the spin. So this is the character assassination. They went straight away of the people they had just murdered. This is Kristi Noem clearly making shit up about Alex Pretty.
This is a violent riot when you have someone showing up with weapons and are using them to assault law enforcement officers.
The video was out at that point in time. This is Border Patrol Chief Greg Bivens.
This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Then, about 200 rioters arrived at the scene and began to obstruct and assault law enforcement.
Maximum damage? 200 rioters. A witness said in the sworn statement that there were about 15 observers there recording and observing. Hey, they're probably lying. Why don't we look at the photo that was taken a few minutes later when, a few minutes after a shooting, there's going to be a lot of crowd turn up to have a look what's going on. The police lines are up, the cars are in. Have a look at the riot that happened straight after. Looks to me like a lot of people just standing around gawking. That's what it looks like to me. Bivens, by the way, went on CNN and called the scene a riot 4 times in the one conversation. He loves that description. And Steve Miller, of course, described Pretty as an assassin who tried to murder federal agents on Twitter. All of those statements came out after the footage had already emerged, so they were obviously lies. What do you think? Do you think that statements like that actually, in their own way, drew a bigger backlash than the shootings themselves, or what? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if the administration had, as you said, simply admitted faults and said it was a really difficult situation, so just denying reality, I think that would have played better. I remember I saw a clip of Jake Tapper on CNN. He did this video where they showed the video of the killing at the same time they played Kristi Noem's comments about what actually happened, just to juxtapose that for viewers, right? It was that immediate response, and so confidently saying, instead of saying we don't know, instead of saying this is early days, we wanted to get to the bottom of this. It's not hard. Like, you don't look weak by saying we're sorry about the loss of a death. We're looking into what happened. But instead, they have just turned the culture wars up to 11, and like you said, immediate spin. I should note that the same Bivens.
Yes.
Did you read about the comment to the lawyer about the Jewish prosecutor?
No.
A day before the 6 prosecutors resigned in protest, lawyers in the office of the prosecutors the U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, Daniel N. Rosen. He's an Orthodox Jew and he observes Shabbat, so he doesn't work on Friday and Saturday. Bivens made comments about him that left the office deeply unsettled about his Jewish faith. Bivens complained that Mr. Rosen had been unreachable for portions of the weekend because of Shabbat. Bivens' remarks followed his complaints about having difficulty reaching Mr. Rosen. this didn't even make a lot of the news because it was one of many things Bivens has done. But yeah, it was just it's not, as you said, even the polling shows this. The intent is one thing, the execution is something else.
Yeah.
Right? I don't mean to make a pun with execution, but I mean the carrying out of the policy was just like, who are these people? How can you have these people? The fact that they are seeing as a voice of a face of restraint. The guy who accepted $50,000 from an FBI agent in a sting with Tom Holman. That tells you just how far from the norm they are in terms of just basic competence.
Yep. And then the next day in Axios, they pathetically all blamed other people. Noam blamed Stephen Miller. She said, everything I've done at the direction of the president and Stephen. Stephen Miller blamed Border Patrol, and therefore Noam, because she controls Border Patrol. Any early comments made were based on information sent to the White House through CBP.
They always turn on each other.
Yeah. And then Trump obviously read the room, backed off a bit. When asked whether he thought the shooting had been appropriate, this is the next day. He told the Wall Street Journal, we're reviewing everything and we'll come out with a determination. That's not a hard thing to say. Then because he's Trump, he kept on going. I don't like any shooting. But I don't like it when somebody goes into a protest and he's got a very powerful, fully loaded gun with 2 magazines loaded up with bullets also. That doesn't play good either. Look, that's not great, but I tell you what, it's still better than what Noam said and Steve Miller.
All those protests, like all those people armed and who stormed the Michigan State House, who were there on January 6th, the face of the sort of anti-woke, anti-George Floyd agenda, the young man who came armed and shot and killed protesters, they were all very strongly in support of President Trump. And in different circumstances, they are treated differently.
Yes, that is that is true. Also, by the way, remember the context this is all happening in as well? Federal immigration officers have shot at least 13 people since September. They've killed 5. There's a pattern of behaviour here.
There's also, I believe it was a senior police officer in Minnesota who said, we've had a drive to get rid of guns, and we've been successful, capturing thousands of guns without any murders.
That's true. Yeah, I believe, this is off the top of my head, okay? So I'm not sure, I'm not 100% sure on this. I'm sure I read somewhere that all the murders in Minnesota at one point in time in 2026, maybe 2 of the 3 murders were by ICE agents. Now, before you're talking getting rid of, this is the moment to get rid of Steve Miller, and I said we'd come back to that. Because this is the moment now, right? This exact moment we're talking about, where he's pointing the finger at Border Patrol, and there's some talk about pressure on Noam. 160 Democrats had signed a letter for her to be sacked. Hakeem Jeffries started threatening to impeach her. He put out this statement: Donald Trump must fire Kristi Noem immediately, or Democrats will initiate impeachment proceedings against her in the House. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Now, of course, it's Hakeem Jeffries, so he picked the non-existent way. That's the last we heard of that threat. But the fact that they went for Bivens, and we'll be talking about that in a second too, the fact they went for Bivens, the smallest target, didn't even go after Kristi Noem. They basically turned Kristi Noem into Gabbard. They just made her useless. But they didn't sack her. They're not going to sack Stephen Miller if they won't sack Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem has no power at all.
Also, the thing with Kristi Noem is that she is impeachable, whereas Stephen Miller is just a political appointee. So there's nothing they can do to actually, to my knowledge, that Congress can do to remove Stephen Miller. All they can do is try to highlight that he is someone who has not served the president well. And again, it's this unique Republican playbook where they never criticize Trump; they criticize his advisors for being a disservice to him. And in terms of your stat, is Amy Klobuchar, the senator running for governor now of Minnesota, who said that 2 of the 3 homicides in 2026 in Minnesota were by federal agents.
There you go. Memory isn't too bad. Yeah. I'm in 2 minds I bring this up, but I think it's something that people don't say, and I think it's worth mentioning. I did talk on Planet America about the fact that the propaganda war does work in many directions, and a lot of people were building these guys up, Rene Good and Alex Preddy, to be saints at the same time as the DHS were trying to make out like they were domestic terrorists. Neither are true. I'm not going to focus on that. I do want to show one clip, which is what Rene Good was doing directly before she was shot, in the minutes before she was shot, okay? She wasn't picking up her kids or whatever, like Adam Schiff said. I've got a clip of that. Before the shooting, she was parked perpendicular across the road, blocking traffic, honking her horn incessantly to annoy the ICE agents. That's what she was doing. Here's the footage here. I warn you, it's very annoying. It's intended to be very annoying. By the way, just to be very clear, I'm not blaming that for her death. I'm not saying that's a reason you shoot someone. What I'm trying to build here is the fact that this is not a good environment. This is not a positive environment for anyone, including the ICE officers. If you recall, every bit of footage you see of Alex Preddy's shooting, there's all these bloody whistles in the background. There is so much whistling going on around Minnesota, and they're allowed to do it. They're allowed to do it. But they are doing it for one reason, and it's to get under the skin of the ICE agents. That's why they're doing it, right? Yeah. They're trying to freak out the ICE officers, right? They're honking at them. They're blowing whistles at them. They're trying to set the nerves on edge. They're trying to outnumber them with cameras and all the rest of it. Like, that's the tactic. It's a good tactic as far as trying to annoy ICE agents go. That's not an excuse to shoot them, but I think we should acknowledge that this is a difficult environment for law enforcement to work in. Okay? It's not the ICE agents' fault that they're there. It is Stephen Miller's fault that they're there, right? But they are there. They're going to make mistakes at times, and they're going to make more mistakes when there's lots of whistles blowing and there's lots of horns honking. Once again, that's not an excuse to shoot someone, but before Alex Preddy was shot, they made how many mistakes? They made like 8 mistakes before Alex Preddy was shot, right? Maybe they would have made 5 mistakes or 4 mistakes, and then maybe that situation might not have developed. Once again, I'm not blaming the protesters because of the shooting. What I'm saying is this is where training comes in.
Yeah.
Right? Like I said, Jonathan Ross, 20 years experience. The 2 Preddy shooters, one joined Border Patrol in 2018, one joined in 2014. They got plenty of experience as well. These are the experienced ones who are making mistakes. We're about to be swamped by inexperienced ones who are getting no training, which I will be talking about a little bit later. So theoretically, what we're seeing right now in Minnesota are the good ones coping the best they possibly can. I don't know what we do about it because the protests are legitimate. Their tactics are legal and sensible, to be honest. I don't know what you do, but it's a dangerous environment, and the better they get at it, the more dangerous the environment becomes. Do you have any thoughts about this? I just think it's worth acknowledging because people just act like everyone should be just a robot and just be absolutely perfect. But this is a horrible environment that they're in.
Yeah, no, it's terrible by all accounts, and it is deliberately antagonistic. Both sides.
Yeah.
Because they find themselves morally justified to be acting the way they're doing.
Totally. And I'm sure people listening go, well, they shouldn't be put in that position. I agree. Obviously. Yeah. They shouldn't be sent there. These raids should not be occurring for all kinds of reasons.
And so the question is, given that Tom Homan during the Obama administration was so much more effective at actually deporting people than during the Trump administration.
In higher numbers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Why doesn't Stephen Miller want to do the more effective way? What is he getting out of these confrontations?
Let's talk about this then. Okay, let's just get a little bit of background at the end of Bivens and Tom Homan taking over. They said Bivens wasn't sacked. He was just going back to his old job as chief of the Border Patrol's El Centro sector. I was going to play a bunch of clips of various people saying he's a great American. That was their talking point. He's a great American. I'll tell you how you know he was sacked. He suffered the greatest indignity that Trump administration person can possibly suffer. They suspended him from accessing his official social media accounts.
Yep.
He went to social media
That was the
Siberia.
tell.
That's the tell.
Yep.
Good riddance. Not only, by the way, did Bivens lie explicitly in court multiple times, he even admitted it, but when they fired a bunch of pepper balls at the crowd in Chicago for no reason, this is his immortal quote, which I'll never forget. If someone strays into a pepper ball, Jared, then that's on them. Don't protest and don't trespass. That's his response to your First Amendment right to protest.
And let's not forget how he came into Chicago, where he came in on a boat on the river for everyone to see, standing like it was Washington crossing the Potomac.
Yeah, with his big jacket.
Yeah.
And on that note, so as you say, the inverted commas good guy is now taken over the alternative. This has actually been a 12-month battle in DHS. You got Kristi Noem, you got her boyfriend, Corey Lewandowski. You've got who just wanders around even though he doesn't have a role. He just wanders around DHS just acting like he's in charge. You got Bavino and you got Stephen Miller on one side. And Noam put Bavino and Border Patrol in charge of all ICE operations a few months back. And I said it was going to get ugly, with a view to as much showy social media bragging, trolling, confrontation as they can get. They like the street patrols, those guys. They're the ones responsible for 70% of the arrests being of people without criminal records. On the other side, you got Tom Homan, the ICE chief Rodney Scott, who no one's heard of because he's been sidelined, and the lower staff. They're the institutional guys. They're not moderate. They're just exactly the same extremism as the other guys, but just they want to go nuts with deportations to detentions by starting with criminals, and they want it to be as low key as they can get away with. They want it to be needlessly antagonistic. As you say, Homan did that under Obama and had higher deportation numbers.
And won basically the highest government employee award you can win.
Yeah, Obama loved it.
Yeah.
Yes. But so now they're gabbarding Noam. She's got nothing to do anymore. And they undermine her effectiveness, and they're choosing Homan over Bavino.
Why you got to insult Gabbard? She's taken on single-handedly the
Very
2020 election, the election truth.
The very important mission that has nothing to do with her portfolio whatsoever. And Bavino left exactly as you'd expect him to leave, by the way. You might not have seen his footage. I can't believe he didn't get out there more. With one of his buddies mooning protesters from a hotel room the night he left. The protesters were just underneath his hotel room, and this was what his mates did in response. That's the Bavino way right there. Okay, and Homan immediately sought agreements with counties, low-key agreements, handing over as many illegal immigrants as he could get from them. He also met with Tim Walz and Jacob Frey, the Minneapolis mayor, both of who said the Trump administration had never even tried to talk to them before.
So what was Miller getting at?
Okay, so let's answer your question there. Oh, sorry, and then he drew down 700 of the 3,000 officers in Minnesota. And the press have completely bought this whole new direction branding. They go, oh, it's a whole new direction, even though really it's not that different. But anyway, certainly it looks different. Okay, so why wouldn't Miller choose the more effective, less problematic method? What's your theory?
I think it's the same Miller who wanted to separate families because he views it as the more attention it gets, the more it deters other immigrants from coming. He wants, and other cities from engaging in the same behavior with sanctuary cities. He views it, one, he views it as provocative in a way that gets attention, and two, he thinks that attention will deter migrants as well as cities and local governments to engage in the same behavior.
I think deterrence is one reason. I think another reason is he wants to encourage a violent reaction.
Yeah, the counter reaction.
Yep. He wants to encourage a violent counter reaction that they can then escalate.
Yep, exactly.
As part of their their mobilisation strategy for the midterms. I think they want to declare declare insurrection.
Do you want to clarify what that is, Insurrection Act?
Yes, the Insurrection Act is where, since the Supreme Court won't let them use the National Guard, they deploy the military as law enforcement to quieten down the riots that they're hoping will take place.
And that's when you have a governor unwilling to support you. The U.S. has federalized troops before, but it's been with the support of the governor. The riots in California in the early 90s, that under George H.W. Bush, that was with the full support of the then California governor.
But I also think that Steve Miller, like we said before, believes that people think like him. He thinks that when he sees a dirty hippie giving him lip, he wants to see them cop a fist in the face. And he thinks that's how everyone thinks. Maybe because he has drunk too much Kool-Aid from the Nixon era, when probably most people did like that at that point in time. Like, that was the Nixon theory, and it worked for him, didn't it, in 1972? Steve Miller would certainly point that out. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in his head, but I think he genuinely thinks that that's a winning tactic, when it is obviously a losing tactic. Obviously. And he just keeps on doing the same thing over and over again. He wants to escalate constantly until the point where people turn off. So I think that's what it is.
There's a lot of people saying that his comments after when he went on Fox News and he said, Denmark is a tiny country with a tiny economy and a tiny military. They cannot defend Greenland under every understanding of law that has existed about territorial control for 500 years. To control a territory, you have to be able to defend a territory. And everyone's saying, oh, this is permission to beat up Stephen Miller. And a lot of people are saying that he is seeking out vengeance for the many slights he's felt his entire career, right? We shouldn't forget what launched him onto the national stage, where he defended white lacrosse players at Duke.
Yes.
Against accusations of them having sexually assaulted a woman. And he was actually proven to be correct that in the court of law, they threw out all the charges against the lacrosse players. And he was seen as, this was initially seen as the mainstream media against the people standing up for justice, and justice is on his side, and he has continued waving that flag ever since then, and he has not changed.
He has not. I'm looking at the clock. We're getting towards the end now. Of course, predictably, I can see I've got a little bit more on Minnesota. And then I had my section about legal stuff with immigration, which is always the bits that I put off. And we're not going to have time. It's good stuff, let me tell you. I've got some good legal stuff on immigration. But that is going on today. Look, we're going to have a couple of bonuses. We'll at least one bonus. So it'll come soon.
Can I have one bugbear in Minnesota?
Oh, yeah. Oh, actually, the next thing I was going to talk about is about Minnesota.
Oh, after you.
No, you can. Okay, I'll go. Okay, I was just going to say, this is what I want to say quickly. A lot of people are looking at the protests. I want to talk a bit more about the protests and about the Minnesotans, how they've been reacting, and thinking, oh, here's a template for how to approach these, because they've actually been doing it very differently to other places. Minnesota is different. You're not going to see this replicated anywhere else. There's a Scandinavian influence in Minnesota that doesn't exist in other parts of America. There's a public culture, there's a civic ethos, there's a lot of religion. There's a heavy Lutheran influence in Minnesota as well, which are more moderate and congregational than evangelicals are. There's a heavy union influence to this day in Minnesota that doesn't exist in other places. They developed the Minnesota style of organising during the George Floyd era as well. Unlike other places, they had more experience on that. So they've been working on it for a while. So rather than obsessing about confrontational protests, a lot of people are helping out in the background. This is what's different about this one. They're running training sessions, they're raising money, they're buying groceries for people, they're picking up kids from school, they're accompanying people through car parks and generally doing what they can to be useful in the background, but like as sort of an organisational force. All these neighbourhood networks being organised through Signal, which conservatives all know about and they've infiltrated and going crazy about, although they can't find any violent rhetoric there that's really annoying them. They're convinced it's Antifa or Soros, but it hasn't occurred to them that the same thing didn't evolve in Chicago or LA. It's a Minnesota community thing, and it's not going to be replicated anywhere else in America, other than maybe Massachusetts, which has very similar demographics to Minnesota. The result of this is that there's a lot more middle-class, non-professional protesters out there than you would see in Chicago or Portland, and they're less violent as well. Take a guess how many locals are trained as observers in Minneapolis. Take a guess.
1,000.
30,000.
No way.
There's a lot of observers. 30,000. They're dwarfing the ICE agents. There's all this footage I've seen. I'll show you this as just as overlay, where there's 2 agents. Maybe there's 10 protesters. I don't know. They're just standing around. And there's 10 observers at least, maybe 20 observers, just following 2 ICE agents around with their cameras, just standing there in a non-threatening way. It must be incredibly annoying for the ICE agents. And that's really, really effective. The only time they've slipped up that I can see is when they started forming checkpoints on the road to supposedly restrict ICE from getting into places. Now, I hated that because that escalates the likelihood of violence. Obviously, ICE can't tolerate roadblocks. So how are protesters going to enforce the checkpoint against ICE? It's going to lead to clashes and physicality and violence, and maybe someone's getting shot. It's also obviously against the law. So I thought it was kind of stupid. Not to mention, they make huge numbers of mistakes and piss people off. Also, it's a bit ironic. Just listen to this idiot protester explaining why they have checkpoints.
We are literally creating a place that we know who's coming and going in and out of our neighborhood.
Which is literally the reason ICE are running around arresting people. They're creating their own form of ICE. Brilliant. That's a pretty big self-own. Aside from that, like Tom Homan came up and said, look, I talked to the police about this. We're going to get rid of them. They're ridiculous. And they just inconvenience their own people and they're against the law. And the police did just crack down on them. And to their credit, then the police shut them down. They didn't make a big fuss. There wasn't any violence, which is great. Minnesota, there's refreshingly little violence. I'm not saying they're all perfect, but it's different to other places, and that's the reason why, in my view. Now, what were you about to say about Minnesota?
Yeah, I similarly want to highlight what makes Minnesota different, and just one bugbear that I want to highlight is how people continue to refer to it as liberal and left-leaning. Any idea how much Trump won Minnesota by in 2024? How many percentage points?
Would it be Trump?
Sorry, lost. How much Trump lost? Excuse me.
Yeah. Look, I think it was close-ish, wasn't it? I think Trump might have won by 2 or 3.
4.
Yeah, okay, 4. Yeah.
Illinois, guess how much?
Trump would have lost Illinois by what? 9?
Almost 11.
Yeah.
They keep in the media referring to Minnesota as like super liberal. It's like, no, this is not Illinois, New York. This is like Minnesota is actually more purple. It hasn't gone Republican in presidential elections in a little while. I think Nixon might have been. Yeah,
I'd say it's been a purple-blue state for the best part of 40 years or 50 years. That's why.
We shouldn't forget who has come out of Minnesota. And in addition to Michelle Bachmann, who's blast from the past, maybe someone by the name of Pete Hegseth from Minnesota.
Yes.
But also Jesse Ventura, right? Yeah. The last time we had a reality TV star go to become a national star in many ways, right? And he did not run on a Democratic ticket or Republican ticket. He ran on the Reform ticket, right? And why was he famous? Because he was a former wrestler, not like, Olympic wrestler, as in WWE wrestler, right? And it's not a dyed-in-the-wool blue states. But yeah, I love that you mentioned the Scandinavian heritage. Fun fact, there was a Norwegian consulate in Minnesota that closed, I think, a decade or 2 ago because there were so many Scandinavians in Minnesota. No, to my knowledge, the only notable consulates in the Midwest area are all in Chicago.
There you go. The only other thing which I got 2 other little things to talk about here briefly. The Preddy shooting is just a random thought. In my view, is proof that the Second Amendment doesn't work and it failed, because the whole point of the Second Amendment is to protect you from a tyrannical government. That's the reason it exists. That's their logic, right? Now we see not only does having a gun not help you at all, It's you having a gun that justifies them killing you, even if you don't use that gun threateningly at all. Just possessing the gun is a reason for them to kill you. If this gets to court, that's what's going to happen. They're going to say, well, we heard he had a gun and we panicked. There, justified. In fact, even now, right-wingers are still justifying killing this guy because he had a gun in exactly the scenario that Second Amendment absolutes thinks you should carry a gun. So, yeah, that's interesting that it's just a complete failure of the Second Amendment. I don't think it's gotten as much publicity as it should.
Agreed.
The other thing is, I just want to talk about, as I said, I'll leave all the legal ICE stuff. Oh my God, there's so much bad news about the law and ICE at the moment. Like this
I'm
whole,
shocked.
this whole, they've turned a new leaf. Man, they have not turned a new leaf. I'll tell you all about it. Is there any chance of them being charged? I want to cover this briefly. Like I said, unlikely. I already spoke about how hard it is to prove in court. They give law enforcement a massive benefit of the doubt. I haven't even mentioned qualified immunity yet, which is a concept invented by the Supreme Court to give law enforcement even more benefit of the doubt. The idea is if someone hasn't been jailed for doing exactly what that police officer did before, then how can that police officer know it's against the law in the heat of the moment? Because that police officer hasn't been trained to not do that exact thing, so you should let them off. It's a really shit concept, but it exists. Furthermore, let's split this into criminal charges versus civil lawsuits. Criminal charges, Trump's government's obviously not going to charge these guys. I don't need to tell you why. They weren't even going to investigate them originally, although apparently now, as part of Trump's new direction, the FBI are investigating pretty shooters at least. Trump will undoubtedly pardon them to make sure Josh Shapiro or whoever can't pardon them can't prosecute them in the future. Doesn't mean states can't criminally charge them. We spoke to one of the chief prosecutors in Minnesota on Planet America. But the feds have done their best to deny the states access to critical evidence early on, like, for instance, the scene of the crime.
Hence her being so open to anyone giving evidence.
Yes.
Which is not something you see often from prosecutors.
And certainly not when they're speaking to Australians. And the state ended up having to get a court order to stop the feds destroying evidence, which was amazing. State charges are going to face all the same reasonable shooting and qualified immunity issues as well, by the way, if they ever get there. Also, there's a doctrine called Supremacy Clause immunity that prohibits state officials from prosecuting federal officials when they're reasonably acting in their official capacity. That's not absolute immunity. You can get around it. It's just a pain in the ass. It makes everything harder. Yeah. Okay, that's criminal charges. Civil charges. In 1871, the Ku Klux Klan Act was meant to protect people from civil rights violations by officials. It's left federal agents exempt. So it works with George Floyd. It gave him a $27 million settlement because they were state agents, but not these guys. By the way, every administration for 45 years has fought closing that loophole. They're aware that it exists. Right. In 1971, the Bivens ruling from the Supreme Court allowed federal officers to be sued in federal court for alleged Fourth Amendment violations. Supreme Court changed their mind, and Bivens has almost been entirely overruled. The joke is, these days, unless the guy who is shot is called Bivens, the court won't respect the precedent. So, be Bivens when you get shot. Also, in 1988, the Westfall Act made it way harder to file tort lawsuits against federal employees like assault and so forth, instead of the federal government itself. Suing the federal government, it is. The Federal Tort Claims Act from 1946 does allow people to sue the federal government for torts committed by federal employees, but there are huge exceptions. So even when you can sue the federal government, if the federal employee was engaged in the exercise or performance of a discretionary function or duty required by their agency or supervisor, you can't sue the federal government. In this case, they were obviously following Bavino's orders. He would have been loving everything they did. So I wouldn't fancy their chances of getting around that. None of this is impossible, but it's all hard. How do we fix it? Congress should close the loophole for federal agents in the Ku Klux Klan tomorrow. They should use this scandal as a trigger. They won't. Hakeem Jeffries hasn't even bothered to do one message on this one. States have been working against this as well. They've got the Ku Klux Klan Act is called Section 1983. They've got what they call converse 1983s where states passed civil rights enforcement laws to trap federal agents. California has one, Maine has one, Massachusetts has one, New Jersey has one. They haven't been tested by the Supreme Court yet,
Okay.
but they exist.
Good to know.
And they cover federal agents. Minnesota does not have one. Illinois passed one last year that covered federal agents just for immigration enforcement. I wonder why that happened. The Trump administration challenged it immediately. It's going to the Supreme Court, presumably. Every state should pass these laws. Minnesota doesn't have one of them. Finally, let's say they can't get any of these. And they might. You never know. Like the Hennepin County prosecutor we talked on Play America, she was confident. Maybe. We'll see. But if they don't, there is a fallback, which I talked about in Planet America. The Al Capone version. Get them for little stuff.
Yeah.
There's a law requiring someone who fires a gun and knows or suspects they have injured someone to immediately render aid. In this case, the agents shot Preddy, didn't perform CPR, and they didn't let a doctor examine him. When finally the doctor was allowed to approach, he knows that rather than providing medical aid, the agents were, quote, appearing to count his bullet wounds. When he asked if Preddy had a pulse, they said they didn't know. So that's not very high standard of medical treatment. 2 years jail. In Minnesota, you can't prevent a police officer or other agents from carrying out their official duties. You don't get much more official than trying to secure evidence with a judicial warrant from a murder scene. They didn't let them do that. Concealing evidence, that's illegal as well.
So just stack them all up.
Stack them all up, they might get 5 years each. That's not a big punishment for murder.
Yeah.
But that might be the only thing they can get. So that's all I have to add on the Minnesota shooting. I'll leave the ICE stuff for later on. Do you have anything else to say about Minnesota before we move on to the final little bits and pieces?
I hate their football team because I love their football team and they've done nothing except give me heartache. The quarterback, last year's quarterback for the Vikings, is going to be playing in the Super Bowl in a few hours. And they got rid of him for... And now, since then, they've gotten rid of the general manager.
That's horrific.
That was a good cancellation in my view.
Jared, you had two little things you want to talk about at the end. You wanted to tell us why you don't like to talk about Epstein, and you wanted to tell us about someone on Tinder. I hesitate to bring this up. I don't even know where this is going.
So I am open to talking about a lot of things in America, but I go out of my way not to talk about Epstein.
Why is that?
One, there's no policy relevance right now that I can see right now. It is purely just like a lot of naming and shaming, right?
That is happening.
Two, it's a lot of speculation.
That is definitely happening.
Then three, we don't have all the information, so there's even more speculation than normal about like what else is there. And I just, look, it's terrible. It's heartbreaking. I've read quite a lot of this, but it's one, I guess the fourth thing, I'm not a lawyer and I didn't go to law school.
Yep.
And so it's really hard for me to speak on Epstein. And so that's why I try to avoid commenting on it at all costs, because beyond the fact that it's just really disappointing.
I don't like talking about Epstein because I don't want to read 3 million files. And I don't like being a person who hasn't read all the information before I open my mouth. But sadly, I am going to be that person on Friday. So we will be talking about Epstein. Jared won't be here, so his hatred is not going to be relevant. But you can skip it when we talk about it, Jared.
So lastly on Tinder,
yes.
I just have to highlight just the fact that we've gotten to the point now that the shamelessness is only increasing. So there's a Republican candidate for governor in Florida who created a Tinder account to, quote, meet young female voters where they are. By the name of James Fishback, he is looking to replace or succeed Ron DeSantis. And he is quite open about the fact that he is on Tinder and showing and talking about it and showing screenshots of his Tinder account, showing that he's out of likes and needs to upgrade to Tinder Plus. And it's effective. We're talking about it, right?
Yeah, I guess we are.
But yeah, it's one of those things though where it's so symptomatic, where just the shamelessness, the ever lower levels of shamelessness or non-existent shamelessness means that they get more viral clicks and they get more attention, and this will lead him to be some D-grade celebrity on what we used to say a reality TV show, but now it will be some YouTube series that he starts.
Some TikTok.
Exactly. It'll be a TikTok personality.
Wow, that's a lovely note to go on. You know what? Screw it. I'm going to leave on a happy note. I want to tell you about the second worst lawsuit ever.
Let's hear it.
It's happy in a savage way. Last year, I told you about the stupidest, most corrupt, weakest lawsuit of all time. It was Trump's lawsuit against CBS about Kamala Harris on 60 Minutes during the 2024 election. I had a lot of fun with that. I'm happy to tell you we now have a contender to replace that.
Excellent.
If it's not number one, it's definitely the second stupidest lawsuit of all time. At least, I'm claiming it. Let me tell you about it. Donald Trump is suing his IRS and his Treasury Department for $10 billion, Jared. Why, you might ask? Well, he says they negligently failed to take the steps necessary to stop his tax data from being improperly disclosed in 2019. Remember when we found out that Trump paid $750 worth of tax in 2016 and 2017?
Yes.
Yeah, that. Trump and Don Jr. and Eric and the Trump org are all suing the government together. Now, you might be wondering, hang on, if Donald Trump sues his own government, won't Scott Bessent and Pam Bondi just refuse to defend the lawsuit without Trump even needing to say a thing? And then Trump gets free money? No, because Trump has openly announced he's going to tell them to pay off the lawsuit.
Essentially, the lawsuit's been won. I guess I won a lot of money.
How would this work, though? Scott Bessent's the head of the IRS.
I know. What I would
Pam
do-
Bondi's the head of the Justice Department. They're going to defend the IRS against you. You're their boss.
Well, there's never been anything like it, in all fairness.
You're going to tell them to pay you, though? Because you're their boss.
Well, what I would do, tell them to pay me, but I'll give 100% of the money to charity. I don't want any of the money.
You take it out.
Sure. Just like you didn't want any of the money that the Trump Foundation scammed from charity, and just like you didn't want any of the money that your rallies were supposed to give to charity in 2016 and they didn't give a cent. But regardless, the important thing is he openly said in that clip he will tell his employees to pay him. So that could not be more corrupt. It's just a license to steal money from the government. And this has never happened before, Jared. Ever.
Yep.
Yes, it's true that Trump sued the government over Mar-a-Lago, the Mar-a-Lago raid.
That's right.
But that lawsuit was launched when he was a private citizen. This is the first time ever a lawsuit's been launched by the president when they were president against his own government. Now, next question is 2019. Who was in charge of the government in 2019? It was Trump. So that negligence from the IRS was his fault. And it turns out that wasn't just a turn of phrase. Even in Trump's own complaint, they write, every year from 2010 through to 2020, the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration has warned the IRS about security deficiencies related to the protection of taxpayers' confidential tax return information. Many of these deficiencies went uncorrected and allowed Little John, that's the guy who hacked him, to misappropriate the information, upload it to a private website, and then disclose it. Dude, you're talking about yourself. Stop punching yourself, Donald. Now you might say, maybe this is hugely corrupt, but it's important that somebody takes a stand to make sure these kinds of crimes aren't committed in future. That's important, Jared.
It is.
Well, how about this? The crime has a recommended sentence of 10 months, but the guy who committed it, Charles Littlejohn, is serving 5 years jail. Why? To send a message. No need for this lawsuit. Okay, fine. But you might ask, maybe it's a strong case. Forget all that, the corruption stuff. Maybe it's just a strong case he's got. No, actually, it's the least strong case possible because there are two claims and both of them are 3 years out of the statute of limitations.
Lovely.
The first one, 7431A1, has to be brought within 2 years after the date of discovery by the plaintiff of the unauthorized disclosure, and Trump found out about the unauthorized disclosure in 2020, which for the maths geniuses out there was 6 years ago. not 2 years ago. Trump says they were not able to bring an action against an unknowable, indeterminate defendant like Charles Littlejohn to vindicate their rights until they were notified of criminal charges against Littlejohn, which was later. Thing is, Littlejohn isn't the guy they're suing. It's the IRS. Trump knew who the IRS were back in 2020. Hint, they worked for him. His second claim under the Privacy Act also has a limitations period that expires 2 years from the date on which the cause of action arises, which can also be filed within 2 years of the date of discovery of the disclosure. The date of discovery of disclosure was in the New York Times on September 2020 when they published the story, so that is all bullshit. Also, other people have tried to sue on time within the statute of limitations, and they all face the same problem, which is that Littlejohn wasn't an IRS employee. He was a contractor. He worked for Booz, whatever her name, Booz Hamilton.
Booz Allen Hamilton.
Booz Allen Hamilton, yeah. Which means Trump can't sue the government for his actions. You know who said that? Trump's DOJ said that. Good. In November 2025, under the Trump administration. They said, at all times, Mr. Littlejohn was a contractor who wrongfully disclosed taxpayer return information. The United States cannot be held liable for his illegal conduct, they said in November 2025. Okay, so it's hugely corrupt, serves no purpose, and has no legal basis whatsoever. But maybe $10 billion is at least a reasonable sum to ask for, surely, for this egregious crime. No, it's not. Spoiler. The Trump's family entire net worth is $6.8 billion. Less than $10 billion. When someone else who had their tax info leaked sued, they end up settling for an apology and $0 because the court decided they couldn't prove $1 of damages. And by the way, Trump's wealth has tripled since this leak came out. So not sure how much it cost him. $10 billion could be steep. That would be more than 5 times as much as any other payment from the judgment fund in the government from January 20 through to September 2025, and more than 3 times all the payments combined in 2024. In fact, it would be the 3rd highest legal payment of all time.
Wow.
The first 2 involved a massive tobacco settlement in 1998 and a 13-year-old boy who set fire to an 8-year-old boy. Both more serious crimes than Trump's tax data being leaked. And by the way, $10 billion, that's not the whole lot. It doesn't include punitive damages.
Oh, wow.
That's just a base $1,000 per unauthorized disclosure on the internet. There actually was just one unauthorized disclosure, the first one. The rest are legal. So really, he should only call it $1,000. But let's call it $10 billion anyway, and then charge punitive damages on top of that. That is why, Jared, that is the second stupidest lawsuit of all time. And you know what? He's going to win.
There's a film, 1973. It's the animated film Robin Hood.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember it's the only animated Robin Hood film, and it's the theme song is Robin Hood and Little John running through the forest, and that made me think of Little John, except it's the opposite of what Robin Hood would do.
It is. Robin Hood better watch himself, or he's going to get sued. Oh my God, I just looked at the time. Lockie is going to be doing some editing of this one. Thanks for staying this entire period. Jared, there is going to be, as I said, a lot of topics coming on Friday with Dave and with his first PEP, and we'll have a bonus soon. Jared, anything else to add?
Thank you for the honor of having me for my for another PEP, and this one. At least it won't be 4 hours, but we've spent over 4 hours in this room, it's been a pleasure.
We've had 4 hours worth of fun at the very least.
Exactly.
Thanks, Jared. We'll see you next time. And until next time, stay peppy.